The seafloor is no longer a quiet archive of coral caverns and eroded limestone corridors. In many regions, it has transformed into a scrapyard of human invention, a landscape littered with the skeletons of ships, fractured concrete blocks, abandoned anchors, collapsed piers, and pipeline frames draped in algae. Where natural reefs once dominated, human structures now rise like accidental monuments. And it is within this new underwater architecture that the moray eel thrives. These serpentine predators have slipped into the gaps, seams, and hollow chambers of our debris, turning metal and concrete into extensions of their hunting territory. For a creature already built like a living periscope, head front-facing, body compressed, jaws hinged with a second internal set of teeth, the irregular geometry of artificial reefs becomes not a challenge but a gift. A rusted ship hull provides a stronger ambush point than a coral overhang, and the broken window frame of a sunken tugboat forms the perfect kill slot through which an eel can lunge with explosive precision. The expansion of artificial reefs across the world's coasts, whether deliberate or accidental, has created a new ecological stage. Morays slip into these structures because they mimic the closed, secure, cave-like chambers they prefer, but these man-made environments also bend the rules of their hunting ecology. Metal corridors produce sharper acoustics, allowing sound to travel differently along their lengths. Certain materials accumulate algae and microbial films at faster rates, drawing herbivores and scavengers in large numbers. Concrete blocks create temperature-stable microhabitats, offering eels refuges when nearby coral ecosystems fluctuate under heat stress. As storms, bleaching, and coastal construction reshape the seafloor year after year, morays simply move into whatever crevice will hold their coiled bodies. They are not loyal to coral. They are loyal to shelter, cover, and unseen angles from which to strike. These altered habitats begin changing the prey base immediately. Artificial reefs attract species that often do not frequent coral environments. Invasive lionfish, searching for new ambush stations. Damselfish grazing on the explosive algal growth fostered by nutrient-rich runoff, and hardy generalist fish that tolerate silty, noisy environments around ports and harbors. Moray eels growing up in these spaces learn quickly that the century-old rules of the coral food web no longer apply. They begin preying on invasive species simply because they are the animals most abundant near the artificial structures. They strike at nocturnal scavengers such as squirrelfish and cardinalfish that hide in the shadows of beams and pillars. They lunge at shoals of small baitfish funneled through narrow openings created by collapsed bulkheads, turning every gap into a choke point. In many regions, the prey of morays now includes organisms that have adapted especially well to human disturbance, such as rabbitfish, hardy wrasser species, and juvenile barracuda that lurk near broken concrete. The menu mutates because the ecosystem mutates. More telling still are the behavioral changes that follow. In natural coral systems, morays depend on subtle, patient ambush, waiting within the darkness of limestone fractures where their mottled skin blends seamlessly with the background. In artificial reefs, however, their camouflage becomes less effective against the stark lines of steel and the clean angles of concrete. To compensate, morays begin optimizing their attack timing rather than visual concealment. Individuals spend more time hunting under the cover of darkness or in the diffused shadows beneath docks. They learn to use structural noise, rattling chains, distant propellers, swaying cables, as auditory camouflage to mask their own movements. In a sense, they become more like urban predators, relying on environmental chaos rather than silence. One of the most striking changes occurs in the spatial layout of their territories. Traditional coral caves limit morays to narrow branching tunnels, where each eel typically defends a small, predictable home range. Artificial reefs, however, offer multi-level chambers, cross-connected rooms, and open frames where the eel can slip from one part of the structure to another without being detected. This creates something akin to a three-dimensional hunting labyrinth. A single moray might occupy a hollow beneath a collapsed engine block during the day and shift to a higher deck cavity at night, following subtle shifts in water flow or prey movement. Some individuals carve out complex circuits through wreck interiors, learning over time which access tunnels offer clean exits and which ones dead-end in silt or jagged metal. These movement patterns create a kind of internal map the eel memorizes and refines over months. Only creatures with a flexible, reactive hunting strategy can exploit such rapidly changing spaces, and morays meet that challenge with evolutionary efficiency. Artificial reefs also increase the frequency of interactions with humans. Moray eels appear more often around fishing lines because small fish congregate under docks and piers, attracted by discarded bait, loose waste, and the shade created by pilings. Eels ambush prey near these hot spots, but often mistake baited hooks for injured fish, leading to accidental entanglements. Divers exploring recreational wrecks encounter morays wedged into engine housings and anchor chains, their jaws half open in the perpetual threat display that is merely a breathing mechanism. As dive tourism grows, so do unintentional confrontations, many caused by disturbed eels retreating deeper into cavities where their escape routes are blocked by human presence. Every new structure humans place along the seafloor, whether for fishing, tourism, or transport, becomes another stage where morays and people cross paths. The feeding ecology of morays also shifts when artificial structures accumulate growth that coral cannot survive. Algae, sponges, and soft coral colonize the surfaces of wrecks and pilings rapidly, drawing herbivores that scrape or graze on their surfaces. In turn, predators such as morays inherit a denser but compositionally different prey base. They ambush rabbitfish that swim too close while grazing on algae-coated steel. They stalk pipefish that thread themselves through rust-worn seams. Even octopuses hiding inside ceramic pipes or metal drums become more frequent targets. The moray adapts as the prey adapts, forming a dynamic relationship with a food web that is continually rearranged by human influence. Wire nets, long lines, and crab traps create another dimension of danger. Morays slip into these devices seeking trapped fish or the scent of struggling crustaceans. Their slender bodies pass easily through openings designed for other animals, but their return journey is more complicated. Hooks catch on their jaws. Their muscular coils twist around monofilament lines, and escape can lead to self-inflicted injury. Yet even these hazards alter behavior over time. Eels that survive encounters with fishing gear may learn to avoid particular sounds or scents, or they may begin ambushing prey further from areas with intense fishing pressure. Their movements start showing patterns of spatial avoidance, a kind of predator map shaped by human risk. Artificial reefs become zones where risk and reward fluctuate alongside human activity, and the most adaptable eels thrive. The transformation of coral ecosystems by heat waves, bleaching, and disease adds another twist. As natural reefs collapse in some regions, morays abandon their limestone homes and move wholesale into human-made structures. Juveniles reared in artificial habitats never develop the same spatial instincts or camouflage responses as those in traditional coral ecosystems. They become bolder, more willing to hunt in open water, and more reactive to rapid changes in light and motion. Their sensory world shifts too. Metal surfaces reflect sound differently than coral, and concrete absorbs vibrations in a unique pattern. Over time, these sensory shifts can influence how eels interpret prey movement or detect approaching predators such as sharks or larger fish. Climate-induced changes also modify water flow around artificial reefs. Storms intensify, stirring sediment and creating unpredictable currents that funnel prey into confined spaces. Morays respond to this with an opportunistic edge, positioning themselves strategically at exit points where panicked fish emerge from swirling silt clouds. Their strikes become faster and more forceful, because rubble environments demand that they secure prey before shifting debris obscures visibility. In these moments, the moray's infamous dual jaw mechanism, a pharyngeal jaw that shoots forward like a second mouth, becomes an evolutionary ace card. It ensures that once prey is captured in the initial lunge, it has little chance of escape within the cramped geometry of artificial tunnels. Over years and generations, this blend of altered habitat, shifting prey composition, increased human encounters, and structural complexity exerts evolutionary pressure. Juvenile eels that survive in rubble fields may develop stronger jaws or faster reflexes, simply because these traits increase their odds in unpredictable environments. Subtle shifts in coloration may arise as individuals blending into artificial surfaces have higher survival rates. While these changes may be gradual on the scale of human observation, the direction is clear. Morays are becoming predators that fit the world humans have built underwater. Artificial reefs were never designed for morays, yet morays have become their most efficient occupants. They turn forgotten metal and abandoned concrete into lethal hunting networks, reinventing their role in ecosystems pushed into disorder. Their survival story is not one of passive endurance, but of continual adaptation. As human structures spread, as storms tear reefs apart, and as coastal environments keep mutating, these eels rewrite their strategies in real time. They are ambush predators, shaped not just by coral caves, but by the global imprint of human engineering. Silent, flexible hunters, thriving in the underwater ruins of our own making. The open ocean once offered manta rays a predictable and ancient rhythm. Vast stretches of clear oligotrophic blue where plankton drifted in gentle seasonal waves, rising and falling with the sun, the currents, and the temperature of distant winds. These giants evolved to glide through that world with near effortless grace, tracing pale blue migration corridors that stretched from equatorial waters to nutrient-rich upwelling zones. Their lives followed slow cycles of abundance and scarcity, each turn of the ocean's invisible wheel guiding them from feeding ground to feeding ground. But the ocean's wheel has begun spinning out of its old groove. Its surface grows warmer, its chemistry shifts, and the water itself grows denser with life and waste at the same time. For the manta ray, a creature whose entire existence depends on filtering everything it passes through, this new ocean can feel less like a sanctuary and more like a gauntlet. The first sign of change is the light. In many regions, the once translucent blue begins to take on a murkier cast. Warmer temperatures stir up plankton blooms earlier in the season, and runoff from coasts carries nutrients that feed explosive algae growth. In some areas, jellyfish fill the space left by collapsing fish populations, their gelatinous bodies drifting in silky curtains that cling to the thermocline. A manta gliding through this water experiences it as a different world. Sunbeams scatter quickly, diffused by suspended life and detritus. Shadows lose their crisp edges. The water feels thicker, more alive, and more unpredictable. Mantas react by adjusting their flight style, reducing sudden banking turns that could crash them into floating jellyfish swarms, and spreading their cephalic fins wider to stabilize themselves in turbulent surface layers. To an observer tracking them from above, their silhouettes appear slightly more cautious, more deliberate, as if they are reading the water one line at a time. These blooms, once short-lived seasonal events, now arrive more frequently. For manta rays, whose feeding strategy depends on sweeping through concentrated patches of plankton, this means a new geography. Where they once followed well-defined migratory lanes tied to temperature gradients and nutrient upwellings, they now chase dynamic hotspots that appear and vanish over days rather than months. Satellite-tagged mantas reveal patterns that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Some individuals remain in productive areas longer, abandoning long-range migrations altogether. Others venture into historically unproductive coastal bays, where warm pockets of nutrient-laden water now generate dense plankton clouds. These rays study the environment not through sight, but through the density of particles drifting across their gill rakers. When the flow thickens, when the texture shifts toward food-rich water, they know they have found a new feeding ground, even if that ground did not exist 5 years earlier. Diving behavior mutates alongside these new patterns. In the clear blue of traditional oligotrophic zones, mantas once performed deep dives during the day, dropping into cooler layers where zooplankton rose at dawn and dusk. The contrast between day and night feeding layers was sharp, dependable, and aligned with the ancient vertical migration of plankton. Now, as warmer surface temperatures push plankton downward or scatter them erratically, mantas experiment. Some ascend into shallow coastal green water, where visibility is only a few body lengths. Others dive deeper for longer periods, tapping into layers that stay cooler and more stable. These shifts alter their energy budgets. Deeper dives require more oxygen management, while longer periods in warm surface layers elevate their metabolic costs. For a creature built to drift with low effort, these new patterns force a recalibration of the very physics of their movement. Feeding style, too, adapts. In clean, open water, mantas often alternate between barrel rolls and linear sweeping passes, depending on how the plankton is distributed. The barrel roll, an elegant, slow-motion spin around a vertical axis, allows them to stay within a single rich patch, looping through the densest zone repeatedly. But in turbid coastal water, where blooms form tangled, uneven clouds, the barrel roll becomes less efficient. Instead, mantas adopt a slalom-like motion, zigzagging through plumes, sometimes tightening their cephalic fins to scoop denser water directly into their mouths. In extreme blooms, they form small feeding groups, each individual aligning with currents to intercept drifting clusters of plankton rather than actively searching for them. The choreography of these groups resembles a shifting constellation, each ray adjusting based on the changing direction and density of the bloom. Yet the soupier water carries a double edge. Alongside plankton, microplastics drift in staggering numbers. Fibers from clothing, fragments from broken packaging, pellets released from industrial sites. To manta rays, these particles are indistinguishable from many natural food sources. They inhale them with each pass of their gills. Studies show that mantas accumulate plastic fragments not just in their stomachs, but also within their gill structures, where the particles lodge between the fine plates that filter plankton. Unlike jellyfish or small fish that might pass small plastics through their digestive systems, mantas engage in non-stop filtering for hours, sometimes days at a time. The longer they feed, the more plastic they ingest. The long-term consequences remain unclear. Plastic might reduce digestive efficiency, block nutrient absorption, or carry toxins that accumulate slowly over a lifetime, measured not in months, but in decades. Another layer of change emerges from jellyfish blooms, which respond dramatically to warming oceans and the collapse of certain fish predators. In some regions, mantas encounter thickets of jellyfish so dense that they alter swimming routes, weaving carefully to avoid stings or clogging. Because mantas filter large volumes of water, even small jellyfish polyps can lodge in their mouths or gill structures. Some individuals are observed adopting temporary avoidance strategies, rising above the densest layers, feeding more at night when jellyfish contract or descend, or shifting laterally across current boundaries where plankton and jellyfish segregate. These strategies are learned behaviors rather than genetic instinct, and they spread socially. Mantas watch each other, adjust trajectories, and refine their routes with what appears to be quiet, flexible intelligence. The growing unpredictability of blooms forces mantas to become ocean-scale detectives. They follow chemical cues in the water, subtle salinity changes, and even floating mats of sargassum that harbor dense micro-ecosystems. These floating islands can be rich feeding zones, but now they also accumulate trash. A manta that approaches a drifting mass might find a banquet of copepods and krill, or it might encounter a haze of plastic fragments suspended beneath the weeds. The animal cannot know until it begins to feed. The risks become part of the daily calculation. Migration, once guided by the reliable pulse of ocean seasons, now resembles a search pattern drawn across a planet in flux. Some populations remain resident near islands where blooms now occur year-round. Others begin exploring greater distances, tracing unstable corridors between hotspots. This widening or tightening of range constitutes a form of ecological mutation, not genetic, but behavioral. The species is rewriting its map on the fly, generation by generation, individual by individual. Tagging data reveals mantas undertaking deeper offshore excursions than before, as though probing for stable pockets of plankton where climate change has not yet erased the old rhythms. Artificial light pollution adds another complication. Bright coastal developments lure zooplankton toward the surface at night, creating concentrated feeding patches that mantas exploit. But these same patches draw small fish, squid, and jellyfish, altering the predator-prey balance around the rays. Mantas slip through the beams of pier lights like enormous, winged shadows, harvesting tiny organisms that swarm upward in the glow. For many individuals, this becomes an entirely new feeding tactic, one born from human disturbance. At the same time, coastal runoff thickens the water with sediments and organic matter, producing murky green zones where mantas must adjust their senses. Visual cues weaken. Water becomes opaque beyond a short range. In these conditions, mantas rely more heavily on mechanosensory input, detecting pressure waves and micro-vibrations across their skin. These changes may alter the way they communicate or coordinate during group feeding events. In turbid bays, mantas sometimes fan out in looser configurations, giving one another more space to avoid collisions in the darkened water. Their flight style transforms from wide, gliding arcs into careful, measured sweeps. Even reproduction may feel the echoes of this new plankton revolution. Courtship and mating historically occur near productive feeding sites where the energy cost of reproduction is balanced by abundant food. If those sites shift unpredictably, courtship timing, gestation routes, and nursery habitats shift with them. Manta rays may begin seeking new pupping grounds where plankton remains reliable enough to sustain pregnant females. In this way, the changing plankton world affects not only daily feeding behavior, but also the long-term structure of manta populations. In all of these transformations, manta rays display a profound resilience. They are giants, yet they survive by consuming the ocean's smallest drifting life. Their future depends on a world of particles, currents, chemistry, and microscopic organisms. As humans alter that world through warming, pollution, coastal development, and nutrient runoff, mantas do not wait passively. They improvise, they explore, they rewire their behavior. They follow shifting oceans with long, sweeping flights that show both power and fragility. Every wing beat through clouded water is a negotiation with an ocean becoming more crowded, more chaotic, and more artificial. And yet, even in this altered seascape, their silhouette remains unmistakable. Broad wings, slow and deliberate motions, a grace that seems unchanged even as everything around them scrambles. They glide through a plankton soup we have helped create, filtering life and debris alike, adapting as fast as the ocean forces them to. Their story is one of quiet endurance, filter giants navigating a world where the smallest organisms have begun to rewrite the fate of the largest. The first thing you notice is the stillness, not the silence. The ocean is never silent, but the poised, hovering stillness of a creature that looks too ornate and too flamboyant for ambush. Its spines flare like a crown, its fins ripple like silk banners caught in a gentle breeze. And yet the lionfish is not ornamental. It is not delicate. It is a predator rewritten by circumstance, an evolutionary outlier that has slipped into a new ocean and begun mutating at a pace visible even within a single human lifetime. In the tropical Atlantic and Caribbean, where it does not belong, the lionfish has become proof of what happens when a species with potent weapons and flexible physiology collides with a world unprepared for its presence. The camera drifts along the reefs of the Bahamas, weaving between sponge towers and coral outcrops. In the Indo-Pacific, the lionfish's natural home, this landscape would be filled with predators that challenge it. Groupers large enough to swallow it whole, sharks that treat its venomous spines as minor inconveniences, and eels bold enough to strike past its defenses. But here, in the Atlantic, the reef is quieter. None of the local hunters have evolved to recognize the lionfish as prey. Its venomous spines deter experimentation, its boldness goes unpunished. And so it grows faster, bolder, and larger than its ancestors ever did in their native territory. The camera focuses on one adult hovering above a ledge. Its body pulses faintly as it spreads its pectoral fins into a wide fan, creating a living net. Small fish hesitate, confused by the sudden barrier. The lionfish drifts closer, each movement calculated, and snaps forward with a speed that contradicts its slow glide. In the Indo-Pacific, prey species have evolved alongside this predator and know how to avoid its approach. But in the Atlantic, the prey do not understand the threat. They freeze in the presence of those beautiful fins. They drift too close. And the lionfish takes advantage, feeding with ease. In this new ocean, the lionfish behaves differently. Studies show that individuals here grow larger, sometimes nearly doubling the body mass of their Indo-Pacific relatives. They reach sexual maturity earlier and produce more eggs. A single female can release tens of thousands of eggs every few days during peak spawning season, and these eggs drift freely through warm currents, untouched by predators that normally feed on gelatinous embryos. The Atlantic becomes a breeding arena with almost no natural breaks. The population expands, not just across reefs, but into mangroves, seagrass beds, shipwrecks, and artificial reefs. Any structure that offers concealment and food. But the most striking evolutionary shift is not the sheer number of lionfish, it is their behavior. Lionfish in their native habitat are cautious. They retreat into crevices at the approach of large animals, including humans. In the Atlantic, they hover out in the open, unthreatened. They hunt more aggressively, often during daylight hours. They form dense clusters in areas rich with prey. Some territories host dozens of individuals, a density rarely observed in the Indo-Pacific. This crowding increases competition, accelerating behavioral shifts. The boldest, fastest, most efficient hunters dominate. Their offspring inherit subtle advantages: slightly larger mouths, slightly faster strikes, slightly more risk-taking tendencies. Over generations, these differences accumulate, crafting a version of the lionfish more extreme than the one that left the Indo-Pacific. The camera sinks deeper down the reef slope. Light grows scarce, replaced by soft blues and grays. Once these depths were beyond the routine territory of lionfish. Cold temperatures and limited prey kept them away, but warming oceans lower these barriers. Individuals tolerant of slightly cooler water begin exploring deeper shelves. Some reach depths beyond 100 meters. The deeper they go, the more the environment filters which individuals can thrive. Those with lower metabolic demands survive better in cooler water. Those with stronger pressure tolerance hunt more efficiently in dim light. The deep reef becomes a selective gatekeeper, favoring traits that allow lionfish to colonize new habitat. Over time, deep water lionfish may become genetically distinct pioneers of an unexplored frontier. The camera shifts to a mangrove forest, where tangled roots hang like submerged scaffolding. These shallow habitats serve as nurseries for countless fish species, offering shelter from open ocean threats. But lionfish now patrol these routes with unnerving ease. Their fins maneuver delicately through the maze. Juvenile fish, unaware of this newcomer's danger, hover too close. The lionfish's presence here is especially devastating. By feeding heavily in nursery zones, lionfish remove future generations of native species before they reach adulthood. This pressure reshapes fish communities. Herbivorous species decline, allowing algae to grow unchecked. Reef health suffers. Predator-prey dynamics destabilize. The arrival of one species initiates a cascade of ecological consequences. Yet even as lionfish dominate, they face a new and unexpected pressure: humans. All across the Atlantic and Caribbean, divers spear lionfish to protect reefs. Restaurants sell lionfish fillets. Conservation campaigns encourage local fisheries to target them. For the first time, the lionfish encounters a predator willing to challenge its venomous spines. And this pressure is beginning to reshape behavior. In areas with heavy hunting, lionfish grow more cautious. They retreat deeper into crevices. They scatter when divers approach. Some populations shift their activity patterns to avoid times when divers typically hunt. These changes, subtle but consistent, hint at selective pressure acting on caution itself. The camera follows a lionfish weaving between coral heads in a heavily hunted region. It pauses at the sight of a distant diver, not out in the open, but beneath a ledge, hidden in shadow. In regions without hunting, lionfish barely react to human presence. Here, they behave like animals that have learned to fear this new apex predator. Over generations, lionfish that recognize the signs of danger, bubbles, silhouettes, the shape of a spear, are more likely to survive. Those with bolder tendencies become easy targets. Natural selection begins trimming the extremes of their fearlessness, but selective pressure from humans is uneven. In remote reefs with little diving activity, lionfish remain bolder than ever. In popular diving destinations, they evolve caution. Across the Atlantic, different populations accumulate different behavioral adaptations, creating a patchwork of lionfish lineages responding to local threats. This fragmentation accelerates evolution. The species that arrived in the Atlantic was genetically broad, likely introduced from multiple Indo-Pacific sources. That genetic diversity provided a wide foundation for rapid adaptation. Each new pressure, cold, depth, competition, hunting, filters those traits in different ways. The camera transitions to a wreck site resting 40 meters below the surface. The structure is covered in coral growth, soft sponges, and encrusting algae. Lionfish glide through the corridors, perfectly at ease in this artificial habitat. Shipwrecks act as population incubators. They offer shelter, consistent food sources, and little competition. Inside this metal labyrinth, lionfish exhibit another behavioral shift: extreme territoriality. Individuals stake out corners of the wreck and defend them aggressively, sometimes confronting other lionfish with displays of flared fins and rapid strikes. This aggression is rarely seen at such intensity in the Indo-Pacific. Here, with high population density and abundant hiding spaces, territoriality becomes a valuable trait. Those who defend their ground gain access to more prey, higher reproductive success, and favorable microhabitats. The camera moves upward again, following a juvenile lionfish drifting in the current. Its stripes flutter like delicate threads. It has no knowledge of its Indo-Pacific origins. It has never encountered a natural predator that recognizes its venom. It grows in an ocean where its advantages compound rather than equalize. And yet, this juvenile is already part of an evolutionary journey. If it drifts into cooler water, only the strongest will survive. If it settles in a heavily hunted reef, only the most cautious will reproduce. If it finds a junk reef or shipwreck, only the most aggressive territorial individuals will thrive. Each environment molds the lionfish into a slightly different form. This is evolution faster than textbooks usually describe it. Not millions of years, but dozens. Not fossils, but living proof. Not speculative, but observable in real time. The final shot widens over the Caribbean, revealing a vast network of reefs, mangroves, wrecks, and deep shelves. Lionfish occupy nearly all of them now. They are no longer invaders arriving from afar. They are residents shaped by the chaos of their new ocean. In the Indo-Pacific, they were one predator among many. Here, they are something else, a species in runaway mode, mutating as environmental pressures pile up. The lionfish invasion is not merely a story of disruption. It is a story of what happens when evolution finds an open door and steps through it at full speed. In the shallow margins of the coastal world, where tides stir silt into slow-motion clouds and sunlight flickers through drifting trash, a small, round shadow glides with deliberate curiosity. Its fins flutter like trembling wings. Its body swells slightly with every breath. To the casual eye, it seems almost comedic, a creature designed by an artist who preferred circles over lines. But beneath that disarming shape lies one of the ocean's most complex and unpredictable survival strategies. The pufferfish is not merely a toxic species. It is a chemical reflection of its environment, a living vessel shaped by the microbes it carries and the waste it eats. In a world increasingly altered by human influence, this tiny wanderer becomes something new, a mutating package of toxins sculpted by sewage, discarded food, warming currents, and shifting microbial worlds. The camera glides through a murky harbor, where the water has a faint green tint from suspended plankton and leaking nutrients. Here, among floating plastic fragments and algae-coated ropes, the pufferfish patrols. It nibbles at surfaces others avoid, the edges of discarded containers, the baffles of sewage outfalls, the undersides of fish farm cages. These human-made structures attract bacterial mats and exotic algae blooms. Some of these microbes produce forms of tetrodotoxin, the potent neurotoxin that makes puffers both deadly and infamous. But others introduce new compounds, variations, and intermediates. As the puffer feeds, it absorbs a chemical fingerprint written by the wastes of human civilization. Tetrodotoxin itself is not produced by the fish. Instead, it is synthesized by symbiotic bacteria that live on their skin, in their gut, and along their organs. In pristine ecosystems, these bacteria feed on natural substrates and plankton communities shaped by ancient seasonal rhythms. But in the modern ocean, microbial communities change with startling speed. Warmer water favors certain strains. Polluted zones promote entirely different ones. Wastewater carries microbes that never existed naturally in marine systems until recent decades. As the pufferfish samples these environments, it becomes a carrier of whatever microbial cocktail dominates that zone. The camera focuses on one puffer inspecting a sewage pipe, where warm effluent seeps into the bay. Filaments of algae sway like green hair in the current. Thick microbial mats coat the concrete. Small crustaceans graze on the slime. The puffer approaches and begins feeding. It bites off algae strands laden with bacteria. It snaps up tiny invertebrates whose guts contain microbes from the outfall. In doing so, it unwittingly reshapes its toxin profile. Different bacterial species produce different variants of tetrodotoxin. Some produce higher concentrations, some produce weaker analogues. Others produce additional compounds that interact with the toxin in unpredictable ways. The puffer's body becomes a shifting laboratory, integrating whatever chemical pathways it encounters. This microbial inheritance affects more than toxicity. It influences behavior. Puffers with higher toxin loads become bolder, venturing into exposed areas because predators avoid them. Those with weaker toxin profiles remain cautious, relying more on camouflage and rapid escape. In polluted waters, these behavioral differences sharpen. A puffer that feeds heavily in trash-laden zones may accumulate toxins strong enough to deter even large predators like groupers or sharks. Another that forages along cleaner reefs may carry only a mild dose, making it vulnerable. These behavioral shifts influence survival, reproduction, and population structure. An evolutionary drift triggered not by genetics alone, but by the chemical landscape humans create. The camera shifts to a fish farm floating offshore. Beneath the netting, uneaten pellets drift downward. They dissolve into soft clouds that attract scavengers. Puffers circle the base of the farm, nibbling at pellets and at the biofilm coating the nets. This diet differs radically from the natural one of mollusks, crustaceans, and sponges. Fish farm waste is rich in proteins, fats, and artificial additives. Puffers feeding on this new resource grow faster and larger. Their organs swell with increased fat reserves. Their microbial communities shift towards strains able to metabolize synthetic ingredients. In some cases, these microbes outcompete the traditional toxin-producing species, reducing tetrodotoxin levels. In others, the enriched nutrient flow fuels bacteria that produce even stronger variants. The fish farm becomes both habitat and laboratory. Puffers hide among the support beams, using shadowed corners as dens. They learn to follow feeding cycles, arriving when workers toss pellets into the enclosures. Their population density increases, altering social behavior. Aggression rises as individuals compete for easy food. Some puffers begin chewing through netting to reach the fish inside the farm. Their teeth, continuously growing and sharpened by hard diets in the wild, find little resistance in synthetic mesh. These escapes trigger fish farm losses, prompting humans to reinforce structures. But the puffers adapt. They find new angles, new seams, new cracks. Their resourcefulness grows alongside their toxin variability. The camera moves to a shallow estuary, warmed by seasonal heat waves. The water temperature here rises several degrees above historical averages, stressing local species. For puffers, the heat rewrites their entire biological calendar. Warmer water accelerates metabolism. Juveniles grow faster and reach reproductive maturity sooner. But it also alters the composition of plankton communities. Cyanobacteria bloom earlier, producing new chemical pathways. Some bloom species host bacteria capable of synthesizing tetrodotoxin precursors. When puffers ingest these plankton indirectly, by eating small grazers or algae coated in bloom residue, the precursors accumulate in their bodies. Their symbiotic microbes convert these compounds into modified forms of the toxin. This thermal shift creates regional chemical signatures. Puffers from one bay may carry tetrodotoxin variants unknown in nearby populations. Puffers from warmer microclimates may be dramatically more toxic. This variability complicates ecological interactions. Predators accustomed to puffers with mild toxicity may suddenly encounter individuals with lethal doses. In some regions, predators begin avoiding puffers entirely, granting them unprecedented ecological freedom. In others, the lack of consistent toxicity encourages predators to test puffers cautiously, creating selective pressure for puffers to maintain high toxin levels to survive these encounters. Silent chemical arms races emerge between prey and predator, shaped not by ancient rhythm, but by abrupt environmental change. The camera glides along a stretch of coastline, cluttered with plastic fragments, driftwood, lost fishing gear, and metal debris. This junk reef hosts a bizarre ecosystem. Microbial colonies coat every surface. Algae grow in unnatural patterns, stimulated by nutrients leaching from human waste. Puffers explore these structures with curiosity, biting pieces of rope, scraping biofilm from bottles, and testing the edges of rusted metal. Each bite adds new microbes to their gut. Some microbes help digest unusual materials. Others bring new toxin pathways. Still others produce compounds that interfere with traditional tetrodotoxin production, muting or altering the puffer's chemical profile. The fish wander through this chemical scrapyard, their bodies integrating each new microbial ingredient. In regions with heavy pollution, puffers sometimes accumulate not only toxins, but heavy metals and microplastics. These substances interact chemically with their microbial communities. Metals can suppress or enhance bacterial activity. Microplastics can host their own microbial assemblages, delivering entire ecosystems of bacteria directly into the puffer's digestive tract. These introductions shift the balance of symbiotic bacteria, triggering new toxin patterns. Puffers become chemical mosaics. One part natural toxin, one part industrial waste, one part microbial adaptation. The camera transitions to a mangrove forest where brackish water flows around tangled roots. Unlike pristine mangroves of old, this one sits downstream of a growing coastal town. The runoff includes detergent residues, organic waste, washed soil, and fertilizers. Puffers navigate through this cocktail with surprising resilience. They adapt to changing salinity. They shift diets to graze on algae that thrive in nutrient-enriched water. Their microbial partners shift with them, leveraging new substrates. Over time, the mangrove puffers develop toxin profiles that differ dramatically from their reef-dwelling counterparts, only a short swim away. Local environmental chemistry writes itself into the biology of each fish. Predators face new risks. Birds feeding on puffers in estuaries sometimes experience variable toxicity. Mild in one season, deadly in the next. Larger fish that once consumed puffers cautiously now avoid them entirely. This predator retreat opens ecological space. Puffer populations expand, competing more aggressively with other herbivores and omnivores. In some regions, puffers dominate reef flats and seagrass beds, their chemical defenses granting them near total freedom to graze, nip, and explore. Their expanding numbers ripple through ecosystems, altering grazing pressure, seagrass structure, and invertebrate populations. The camera returns to a single puffer drifting through afternoon light. Its movements are gentle, almost buoyant. Yet inside its body lies a chemical script that reflects everything around it. The microbes living in the algae it ate last week, the bacteria coating the sewage pipe it explored yesterday, the temperature of the water, the nutrients carried by the last storm. Its toxin is not fixed. It mutates with every environmental shift, every new bacterial colony encountered, every new food source sampled. In a rapidly changing ocean, the pufferfish becomes a symbol of biochemical evolution, written in real time. Not through slow genetic drift, but through microbial partnerships that respond instantly to new environments. Not through ancient adaptation, but through the chemistry of human influence. Not through stability, but through constant mutation. The pufferfish drifts through the world we are building. Warm, nutrient-rich, polluted, structurally altered, and it changes with it. A living, swimming, expanding sphere of chemical possibility, shaped by whatever microbial future we create. The reef does not fall apart quietly. When storms tear across shallow tropical seas, when bleaching kills living coral, when dynamite fishing shatters centuries of growth in a single thundering blast, the aftermath looks like a battlefield. Branching corals lie snapped into thousands of fragments, plates crumble into gravel, massive colonies collapse in jagged heaps. The seafloor becomes a maze of shadows, tunnels, and broken architecture, a disorderly, unstable landscape that shifts with every surge of current. Most reef creatures suffer in this chaos. Many vanish, but one predator thrives. Hidden beneath chunks of coral and volcanic rubble, the mantis shrimp begins to rewire the rules of survival. The camera glides low across a rubble field. Every piece of debris holds a crevice or pocket of darkness. Small fish dart nervously through the maze. Crabs cling to overturned coral heads. But beneath it all, a mantis shrimp waits in a burrow reinforced with scavenged shells and stones. Its eyes, perched atop articulated stalks, sweep the environment independently, absorbing information at a level unmatched by any other animal. Through the scattered light and swirling sediment, it sees ultraviolet reflections bouncing off fish scales, infrared shadows drifting across the bottom, and polarized shimmer lines invisible to most species. In this cluttered war zone of rearranged reef, superior vision is not just an advantage, it is a survival requirement. Prey appear from unexpected angles, predators attack from blind corners, and rivals emerge abruptly from neighboring burrows. To survive here, a mantis shrimp must decode a visual world that has become more complex, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous. The rubble field acts as an evolutionary accelerator. With hiding spaces everywhere and no stable open plains, ambushes occur at close range. Here, reaction time determines who survives the split-second encounters that define life in this fractured terrain. The mantis shrimp strike, already among the fastest movements in the animal kingdom, becomes even more crucial. Individuals capable of unleashing a strike that accelerates faster than a bullet separating from a gun barrel gain enormous leverage. Those with slower strikes miss opportunities or fail to deliver killing blows in tight quarters. In this chaotic habitat, a mantis shrimp does not simply punch quickly, it must punch decisively, adapting its weapon to a world where rubble obscures angles and ambushes can erupt at arm's reach. The camera closes in on a male mantis shrimp patrolling his territory along a corridor created by collapsed coral. The floor beneath him is uneven and unstable, littered with fragments that shift under his weight. Every few steps, he pauses and brings his eyes forward, calculating depth through trinocular vision, one of biology's strangest and most precise sensory tools. Each eye processes depth independently, allowing the shrimp to construct a layered three-dimensional map of its surroundings. In a clean, intact reef, this vision helps track fast-moving prey. In a rubble field, it becomes crucial for navigating a labyrinth where every gap leads into another chamber and every angle hides a threat. Another mantis shrimp appears from a nearby crevice. Their territories overlap now because the stable coral architecture that once provided natural boundaries has collapsed. Competition intensifies. The two males raise their raptorial appendages, the club-like weapons that deliver their legendary blow. They flare their bodies, revealing flashes of iridescent colors along their carapace. These displays serve as warnings, attempts to avoid costly fights, but rubble fields produce strange acoustics. Cracks, thumps, and shifting rocks generate constant background noise. Signals are harder to detect, and miscommunication becomes common. A slight shift of shadow, a sound muted by coral fragments, or a delayed retreat can trigger conflict. The two shrimps battle, each strike sending micro shockwaves through the water. Bits of rubble scatter with every impact. Eventually, one retreats into a crevice, and the victor moves on, reinforcing his burrow with collected shells. But the rubble itself is not the only habitat reshaping mantis shrimp evolution. The camera moves closer to shore where human structures extend into the water. Pier pilings encrusted with barnacles, discarded blocks from old construction sites, ropes tangled with algae, metal frames from abandoned fish traps. These artificial structures create a new kind of reef. Junk reefs, cobbled together from the leftover debris of human activity. To many animals, these areas represent damaged habitat. To the mantis shrimp, they are prime real estate. A mantis shrimp explores an old concrete block partially buried in sand. Its rectangular edges create sharp shadows and multiple chambers. The shrimp slips inside, inspecting each cavity with its probing antenna. Eventually, it selects a narrow hole that leads into the interior. Here, the shrimp begins remodeling. It drags small stones into the opening, constructs a defensive ring of crushed shells, and clears sediment with quick bursts of water jetted from its maxillites. Within hours, The block has been transformed into a fortified bunker. In the dim interior, the shrimp's eyes glow faintly as they adjust to low light. It is safe here. Safer perhaps than in natural rubble, where predators may dig or collapse the delicate structures, yet these junk reefs come with new challenges. Their hard surfaces resist the subtle cues a mantis shrimp uses to sense vibrations. Predators like octopuses or large fish use these structures too, often approaching silently along the flat surfaces, but the mantis shrimp compensates. It learns to interpret the echo of its own movements, sensing how vibrations bounce off walls in patterns unique to artificial chambers. Its punch becomes even more valuable in these confined areas. A mantis shrimp can strike a rival, crack a snail shell, or stun a passing fish with explosive force even in tight quarters. The walls themselves amplify some shockwaves, creating brief bursts of disorientation that favor the shrimp's lightning-fast reactions. The camera follows a female mantis shrimp emerging from a burrow beneath a fallen coral head. She carries clusters of eggs, carefully rotating them with her appendages. In stable reefs, females often guard their eggs from within deep burrows, shielded by thick coral walls. But in rubble fields, structures shift frequently. A surge can collapse a burrow or expose it. To compensate, some females choose artificial substrates like pier pilings or concrete slabs, where cavities remain intact even under strong currents. Others reinforce their burrows with scavenged materials, creating layered walls that resist collapse. These behaviors influence reproductive success, creating a selective pressure for individuals who can identify and engineer more secure dens in unstable terrain. As the camera drifts downward, a mantis shrimp lunges from beneath a rock fragment to strike a passing fish. The impact produces a flash of cavitation, a tiny explosion of vapor triggered by the rapid acceleration of its club. Even when the club does not physically hit the target, the cavitation bubble can stun or kill prey. In cluttered rubble fields, where direct strikes are often blocked by debris, this secondary effect becomes increasingly important. Individuals that generate stronger cavitation have higher hunting success. Over generations, rubble environments may favor mantis shrimp with more powerful clubs and refined targeting skills, accelerating an underwater arms race. Noise becomes another evolutionary filter. In intact reefs, sound travels predictably through solid coral structures. In rubble fields, sound scatters chaotically, bouncing unpredictably between irregular surfaces. The mantis shrimp uses its sense of vibration to detect prey, rivals, and predators. But with noise levels rising, from shifting rubble, wave surge, and even human engines, the shrimp must learn to interpret new acoustic environments. Some individuals become more sensitive to low-frequency vibrations that cut through the noise. Others rely more heavily on vision, using polarized light detection to spot prey hidden among debris. These sensory adjustments shape behavior and influence which individuals survive long enough to reproduce. The camera sweeps across a section of reef ravaged by dynamite fishing decades earlier. Coral skeletons lie broken in every direction. But in the midst of this devastation, mantis shrimp populations surge. Their burrows dot the landscape. Their territories overlap. Their foraging behavior becomes more aggressive and opportunistic. Prey species that once hid among branching corals now shelter beneath scattered rubble, creating an environment where mantis shrimp must strike faster and from more angles. This pressure favors individuals with exceptional depth judgment, a trait already advanced in the species, but now pushed into even sharper refinement. The rubble field becomes a crucible of competition. Rivals fight more frequently for limited high-quality burrows. Predators strike unexpectedly through unstable crevices. Prey appear and vanish without warning. The mantis shrimp's world becomes one of constant vigilance, rapid decision-making, and sensory processing pushed to its limits. Each generation inherits a landscape reshaped by both nature and humanity, and evolves to conquer it. The final panoramic shot reveals a reef in two states. On one side, the living corals still glow with life. On the other, rubble spreads like a scar. Within that scar, mantis shrimp rule, not as victims of destruction, but as beneficiaries of a battlefield that rewards speed, intelligence, and weaponry, unlike anything else in the marine world. Their punch, once honed for cracking shells on stable reefs, now thrives in junk reefs, rubble fields, pier pilings, and wreck fragments. Their eyes, already unmatched, refine themselves further to decode the complexities of shifting habitats. Their behavior evolves in real time, forging new strategies to defend burrows, catch prey, and navigate noisy, unstable environments. In a world where many reef species struggle to survive the chaos left behind by storms and human disruption, the mantis shrimp turns rubble into opportunity. Its arms race continues, not in pristine coral gardens, but in the broken architecture of a rapidly changing ocean. Here, in the fractured shadows of reef ruin, the mantis shrimp becomes not merely a survivor, but a specialist of disorder, thriving where others falter and evolving at a pace shaped by the turbulence of its time. At first glance, the tropical shallows look peaceful. Sunlight dissolves into soft turquoise ribbons, waves fold themselves gently over sandbars, and the water appears almost empty except for drifting particles of plankton. But hidden within this calm lies one of the ocean's most dangerous transformations, a silent expansion of predators that kill without teeth, without sound, and without warning. The box jellyfish, once confined by seasonal temperature limits and narrow coastal zones, is now rewriting its boundaries. As oceans warm and coastal habitats become more hospitable for its rapid-fire life cycle, this nearly invisible hunter spreads farther, appears earlier, and lingers longer. In nursery bays where fish larvae once thrived, the jellyfish's tentacles now hang like electrified tripwires. The camera descends into knee-deep water where the surface shimmers with reflected sky. Nothing moves at first. Then a faint blur materializes, a transparent cube with thin, trailing lines nearly impossible to distinguish from the water itself. The box jellyfish glides with deliberate precision, using its muscular bell to maneuver like a stealth vehicle. Unlike most jellyfish that drift passively, box jellyfish are active swimmers. They track prey with direction. They adjust their course with intention. Their bodies pulse with a rhythmic efficiency, coordinated by a nervous system more developed than expected for a creature so simple in appearance. In these warming shallows, that precision becomes a lethal advantage. Historically, box jellyfish appeared only during certain warm months in specific coastal regions. Their presence signaled a narrow seasonal threat. But as sea surface temperatures rise, those narrow windows widen. The lines separating safe months from dangerous ones blur. In some regions, jellyfish now appear several weeks earlier than records once indicated. In others, their season stretches longer into the year, sometimes doubling in length. This expansion is not random. It is tied directly to the biology of the box jellyfish, a rapid, flexible life cycle perfectly suited for a warming world. The camera shifts to the underside of a wooden dock. Patches of algae, barnacles, and tube worms cling to the pilings. Among them sit tiny, inconspicuous organisms, polyps, the hidden life stage of jellyfish often overlooked by even seasoned researchers. These polyps resemble minuscule sea anemones, attached tightly to surfaces that offer protection from waves. They are nearly invisible, no larger than grains of sand, but they are the engine of the box jellyfish's expansion. When conditions are right, when water temperature rises just enough, when nutrients bloom from runoff, when currents bring the correct chemical cues, these polyps undergo a transformation. They begin to bud, dividing rapidly, releasing tiny medusae into the water. Each medusa grows into a free-swimming jellyfish. Man-made structures like seawalls, docks, breakwaters, aquaculture frames, and even boat hulls provide perfect real estate for these polyps. Unlike natural rocky shores, which shift slowly over time, human structures remain stable and abundant. In nutrient-rich, warm coastal areas, polyps thrive. They multiply. They release jellyfish earlier and more frequently. Each year, their population increases by stacking cycles of reproduction atop cycles of warming, creating ideal conditions for sudden swarms. The camera rises from the docks and drifts into a lagoon. Here, the water is slightly murkier, green with phytoplankton, enriched by runoff from coastal development. This nutrient boost fuels plankton blooms that feed fish larvae, crustaceans, and countless small organisms. but it also supports the early feeding needs of juvenile jellyfish. Within days of release, the tiny medusae feed voraciously, growing quickly as long as prey is abundant. In warm, nutrient-laden water, their growth accelerates. Individuals reach dangerous sizes sooner, and more survive the vulnerable early stages. As currents push these young jellyfish toward embayments, sheltered coves and river mouths, the camera captures the transformation of what was once safe habitat into a gauntlet of nearly invisible predators. Fish larvae, only millimeters long, drift along with the currents. Small crustaceans scuttle through mangrove roots. These nursery zones are vital for coastal ecosystems, but the box jellyfish disrupts that rhythm. Its tentacles, loaded with nematocysts capable of firing venom at blinding speed, create an invisible maze. A single brush, even for a creature far smaller than a human, delivers enough venom to paralyze instantly. The larvae do not swim away. They simply stop moving. For box jellyfish, this efficiency allows swarms to feed with little energy, turning nursery zones into feeding arenas. The camera transitions to deeper water where larger juveniles undertake short daily migrations, rising and sinking with light levels. Their behavior is guided partly by simple nerve nets and partly by a set of unique sensory structures, the rhopalia. Each rhopalium contains multiple types of eyes, some able to detect shapes, others motion, others simply light intensity. While not eyes in the vertebrate sense, these structures allow box jellyfish to navigate with far greater awareness than other jellyfish. They can avoid obstacles, they can respond to the movement of prey, they can actively hunt rather than drift. And in coastal zones increasingly dominated by human structures, this visual capability helps them weave through pilings, nets, and mangrove channels with startling precision. The warming of coastal waters adds yet another layer to their advantage. Box jellyfish metabolism increases with temperature. They move faster. They digest prey more efficiently. They reproduce sooner. A warm year produces more jellyfish. A warm decade reshapes entire coastlines. Regions once too cool for box jellyfish now experience summers warm enough to sustain them. Hot spells driven by climate cycles push them into new latitudes, turning previously unaffected beaches into danger zones. For local fish populations, this expansion introduces a new predator that does not rely on sight or sound and can kill in moments. In some areas, researchers observe a new pattern: erratic peaks in jellyfish numbers triggered by abrupt temperature spikes or heavy rainfall events. These environmental shocks mimic the natural cues that polyps use to release medusae. When rainfall washes nutrients from land into the sea, the pulse of productivity jumpstarts jellyfish growth. When water temperature rises a few degrees, polyps release medusae en masse. Seasonal cues, once predictable and synchronized, become scrambled by climate. Jellyfish respond by blooming unpredictably, creating chaotic kill zones at times when local species least expect them. The camera returns to the water's surface, where a slight breeze ripples the shallows. A lone swimmer in the distance would see nothing amiss. The water appears clear, inviting, ordinary. But just beneath the surface, dozens of box jellyfish drift silently. Their tentacles spread like transparent threads, each loaded with venom potent enough to shut down a human cardiovascular system in minutes. For small animals, the effect is instantaneous. A brush of a tentacle is enough to rupture cellular membranes, disable nerve impulses, and stop the heart of a fish no longer than a thumb. Unlike predators that bite or chase, box jellyfish require no pursuit. They extend their territory simply by existing wherever the water is warm and productive enough. Every year that climate pushes temperatures higher, they occupy new ground. Every year that coastal construction adds more hard surfaces, polyps secure new footholds. Every year that nutrient pollution increases, juvenile jellyfish feed more successfully. These layers of human influence stack upon one another, creating conditions the jellyfish exploit with unintentional precision. The camera shifts to a mangrove-lined inlet teeming with juvenile fish. These sheltered waters have always been critical nurseries, buffers between open ocean and adulthood. But as box jellyfish become more common, the survival rates of young fish decline. Predation pressure increases, not from visible threats, but from these translucent barriers drifting just centimeters above the bottom. Some species shift spawning seasons to avoid peak jellyfish blooms. Others spawn in slightly deeper water, where jellyfish densities are lower. But these adaptations lag behind the rapidly changing conditions. For many, the cost is too high. Nurseries may no longer serve their intended function, altering the structure of entire fish communities. The camera moves outward toward offshore reefs where box jellyfish are less common, for now. Adults occasionally drift farther from shore, carried by currents or following prey. Warming ocean temperatures reduce the thermal barrier that once kept them close to land. While they remain primarily coastal predators, sightings in offshore zones are increasing. Each sighting marks another step in a trend accelerated by climate and human influence. The final panoramic shot reveals a coastline shimmering under a tropical sun. Beneath the surface lies a network of expanding kill zones. Not loud, not dramatic, but lethal and spreading. The box jellyfish thrives in the new coastal reality. Warmer water, nutrient-rich runoff, abundant man-made structures, and fragmented seasonal cues. It does not chase its future, it intercepts it. And in the process, it transforms miles of shoreline into arenas where survival hinges not on vigilance alone, but on sheer luck against an enemy nearly impossible to see. The box jellyfish has become one of the ocean's quietest winners in a rapidly warming world. Invisible, deadly, opportunistic, it multiplies along the edges of human expansion. Its range mutates, its season extends, its life cycle accelerates. And for countless small creatures drifting in nursery bays, the water around them has become an invisible electric fence, one that grows wider, thicker, and more unpredictable with every passing year. In the dim, shifting half-light of the seafloor, where sand ripples like wind-blown dunes and every rock hides a story, a shape stirs, then melts, then reforms into something entirely different. The octopus, master of disappearance, emerges like a thought materializing from the water itself. But today, this creature is not simply a symbol of intelligence or camouflage. It is a symbol of speed, speed of adaptation, speed of experimentation, and speed of evolutionary response in oceans that are changing faster than most species can understand. With lifespans measured in a handful of years and reproductive outputs in the thousands, the octopus lives in a world where every generation is an experimental draft of the one before it. And in a warming century, that rapid turnover is reshaping their place across the world's oceans. The camera moves across an underwater plain battered by a recent heat wave. Warm pulses of water roll along the bottom, pushing species toward their thermal limits. Many animals retreat or perish, but the octopus does something else. It shifts, it experiments with depth. Individuals accustomed to the shallows begin exploring cooler micro-refuges, rock crevices shaded from direct sun, deep pockets beneath boulders, abandoned burrows left by fish, and even artificial structures that humans left behind. In some regions, populations descend several meters deeper than their historical range, using the natural stratification of the water column to buffer themselves against the heat above. This behavioral migration is not a one-time event. It repeats with every heat wave, every seasonal anomaly. Each generation inherits not only genetic predispositions, but environmental cues from its early life stage. If waters are warm, young octopuses settle deeper. If currents shift, they build dens in different substrates. The species does not wait for slow genetic adaptations. It uses flexibility, biological improvisation, to cope with the immediate. Yet these improvisations open the door for evolution. Offspring that survive in deeper or cooler waters leave behind genetic combinations suited for those habitats. Within a few short reproductive cycles, shifts become trends, and trends become new norms. In contrast, the camera transitions to a temperate coastline where warming water has a different effect. Instead of pushing octopuses deeper, the warmth pulls them into previously unsuitable regions. Temperate shores that once felt like cold barriers now resemble the warm, rocky habitats many species prefer. Octopuses begin appearing in kelp forests where they were once rare, hunting crabs among the fronds, raiding shellfish beds, and occupying dens in rockwork that no prior generation explored. Some invade sandy bays, using burrowing behaviors typically seen in tropical relatives. Climate becomes a door opening to new ecological stages, and the octopus enters without hesitation. Their arrival sends ripples through the food web. Crab populations decline in newly colonized zones, prompting predators to shift feeding patterns. Shellfish beds suffer increased predation pressure. Fish species that evolved without heavy octopus predation begin altering their behaviors, avoiding crevices and shadowed ledges where ambushes are now common. Even the kelp forest architecture changes subtly as grazing invertebrates decline due to octopus predation. Here, the octopus is not simply adapting, it is actively rearranging the ecological balance as it expands. But the story of rapid adaptation goes deeper than habitat expansion. The camera zooms into a fish farm along a temperate coastline, where nets hold thousands of fish above the seafloor. At night, shadows move along the perimeter. Octopuses have discovered these farms, not as a curiosity, but as opportunity. They slip through small tears in the mesh or lift the netting with surprising force. Once inside, they move silently among the shoals, taking only what they need before escaping through the same gap. Fish farmers wake to find fish missing, nets damaged, and no obvious predator. The culprit fits through openings no larger than a clenched fist. This raiding behavior spreads rapidly. Young octopuses observe adults, learn the entry points, and refine escape strategies. In only a few years, entire local populations become proficient at fish farm infiltration. The behavior is not uniform. Each region develops its own techniques. Some species pry open crab pots, lifting the lid or squeezing through ventilation gaps. Others unscrew jars or containers used by fishermen to store bait. Still others drag small traps across the sea floor until they reach a secluded spot where escape is safer. The ocean becomes a laboratory where octopuses test the boundaries of human-made structures. The camera dives into a scrapyard of the seafloor, a place littered with pipes, bottles, tires, and half-buried machinery. To most animals, this would be a wasteland. To the octopus, it is a city of opportunity. The creature enters a broken pipe, rearranging shell fragments to form a door. Another individual claims a discarded bottle, turning its narrow neck into both shelter and escape hatch. A third transforms a rusted metal can into a fortified den, lined with pebbles and crab shells. These makeshift homes offer safety from predators and proximity to foraging grounds. Artificial dens change the species' behavior in unexpected ways. Bottles and cans provide tighter, more secure shelters than many natural options. Some octopuses appear to invest more heavily in their dens, adding decorations, building elaborate middens of prey remains, or storing tools like rocks used for prying open shells. These artificial structures support higher survival rates in juveniles, shaping population dynamics. In heavily littered regions, octopuses become more sedentary, establishing long-term territories centered around human debris. In cleaner regions, their behavior remains more transient and nomadic. Human waste inadvertently becomes a selective pressure, shaping behavioral strategies. The camera shifts to an octopus moving through a sandy channel at night. Its body flows like liquid, changing from silver to black to coral pink as it glides across different substrates. It pauses, raising a few arms like antennae, tasting chemicals in the water. This sensing ability, part smell, part touch, part electroreception, allows octopuses to navigate environments that change daily. Their intelligence, distributed across their arms and central brain, makes them natural explorers. Each arm can act semi-independently, learning textures and shapes. When environments shift, octopus behavior shifts with them, absorbing new information at a rate few marine animals can match. Because octopuses live only 1 or 2 years, their entire life cycle plays out against the backdrop of climate change in fast forward. A generation born during a warm year may develop heat-resistant behaviors or settle deeper. The next generation inherits a different ocean, perhaps one where prey species have shifted northward or shelter has become limited. Unlike long-lived animals that rely on slow genetic evolution, octopuses rely on behavioral plasticity and high reproductive output. A single female may lay tens of thousands of eggs. Only a fraction survive, but those survivors represent a wide sampling of behavioral traits and physiological tolerances. Natural selection acts quickly and intensely, sculpting populations with each succeeding year. The camera transitions to deeper waters, where cold refuges form pockets of stability. Some species retreat into these zones during heat waves, surviving among boulders and shadowed crevices. Others remain in the surface shallows, tolerating higher temperatures by altering activity patterns, hunting more at night when water cools, or sheltering during midday. Physiological shifts occur as well. Some populations begin showing increased tolerance to warmer water, documented through metabolic rates and thermal thresholds. These changes, though subtle, accumulate across generations. On temperate coasts, octopuses expand into rocky reefs newly warmed by shifting currents. They alter predator-prey dynamics, sometimes becoming dominant predators in areas once ruled by fish or crabs. Their camouflage, unmatched by any other marine animal, allows them to enter ecosystems unnoticed before rapidly altering the local food web. They hunt selectively, often focusing on species that lack defenses against such an adaptable predator. These expansions create new ecological pressures that ripple outward, influencing shellfish harvesting, crab fisheries, and reef health. Meanwhile, in heavily urbanized coasts, octopuses exploit trash sites with uncanny ease. They hide beneath broken appliances, inside soda cans, or alongside concrete rubble. Some individuals create multi-chamber dens using a combination of natural stones and human debris. These hybrid dens alter predator avoidance, mating behavior, and territory dynamics. Predators like moray eels or large fish struggle to access octopuses in narrow bottlenecks or reinforced metal cans. As a result, survival rates improve, and octopus numbers grow. This in turn increases predation pressure on small crustaceans and shellfish, subtly reshaping benthic ecosystems. The camera returns to a shallow cove where an octopus drags a crab pot along the seafloor. It positions the pot upside down, extracts crabs through the mesh, and moves on. This level of tool use and problem-solving underscores a deeper truth. Octopuses are not merely responding to environmental change, they are actively exploiting it. Their intelligence, combined with their rapid life cycles, makes them one of the fastest evolving marine predators on the planet. In the final scene, the camera rises above a mosaic of habitats: deep refuges, warming kelp forests, trash-littered harbors, fish farms, rocky shallows, and drifting offshore plains. Octopuses occupy each one, experimenting, adapting, and reshaping. Some dive deeper to escape heat, others expand into new coastlines. Still others build dens in human debris or raid human structures. Every generation tests new strategies, producing variations that survive or fail, leaving behind an evolutionary footprint written in fast forward. In an ocean where many creatures struggle to keep pace with change, the octopus accelerates. Where others resist, it innovates. Where ecosystems fragment, it rebuilds its niche. The octopus is not simply enduring a changing planet, it is mutating with it, rapidly, creatively, relentlessly. Proof that in a world rewritten by climate, intelligence and adaptability may be the most powerful survival tools of all. The first thing that disappears underwater is not sound or shape. It is color. Red drains away within a few meters, orange follows, and by the time you reach the shallow seafloor, the world has collapsed into shifting blues, greens, and muted shadows. Yet even in this dissolving palette, the cuttlefish glows like a living contradiction. Its skin ripples with patterns too fast for the eye to dissect, its body a canvas controlled by thousands of chromatophores, iridophores, and papillae that switch on and off like a biological screen. But the ocean is not the same screen it once was. As water clarity shifts under the weight of human activity, sediment from dredging, algal blooms driven by warming, particles washed from rivers after storms, the cuttlefish's language of light and color must adapt. Its entire survival strategy hinges not on brute force, but on how well it can read and respond to changing visibility. The camera descends into shallow water where fine sediment hangs suspended like dust in sunlight. Every movement of the fins stirs the particles into brown clouds. Historically, this habitat was clear, the sand rippled by currents, the rocks visible from meters away. Now, increased runoff and disrupted seagrass beds have transformed it into a hazy, near-permanent twilight. A cuttlefish hovers here, floating effortlessly, body angled slightly downward. Its skin shifts from pale sand to mottled silt in an instant, but something else happens too. The pattern remains, though modified. Broader patches, stronger outlines, fewer fine details. In murky conditions, predators do not see intricate patterns, they see contrast. And so the cuttlefish adjusts, replacing micro-textures with macro patterns better suited for concealment in low clarity. This shift is not uniform across individuals. Younger cuttlefish experiment constantly. One attempts a bold split pattern. Half its body matches the seafloor, the other half mimics drifting debris. Another flickers through several contrasts quickly, as if testing which illusion survives in the shifting light. Their skins behave like learning systems, sampling the environment in real time. In clear water, they produce fine, crisp camouflage. In murky water, they generate broader strokes, like painters abandoning detail when the canvas is dim. They are not merely hiding, they are recalibrating the entire grammar of their visual survival. The camera glides into a region shadowed by an algal bloom. Warm water and nutrient runoff have triggered massive plankton expansions that turn entire bays into green soups. Here, visibility collapses to a meter or less. Light disperses unevenly, scattering across suspended particles. A cuttlefish sits beneath a ledge, watching shapes drift through the haze. Its chromatophores twitch, producing a pulse pattern unlike the subtle, slow transitions usually seen in clear water. Instead, the cuttlefish flashes high-contrast bars, sudden, bold stripes that cut through the murk. This is communication, not camouflage. Cuttlefish depend on visual messaging to coordinate mating, warn rivals, and signal intentions. In a bright environment, these signals can be delicate, shimmering ripples, gentle gradients, and precise micro-patterns along the body. But in green haze, subtlety vanishes. Signals must stand out, or they are lost. Males court females with stronger contrasts. Rivals display more aggressive, bolder bars. Some signals shift from color-based to shape-based, relying on raised papillae to create three-dimensional textures that remain visible even through obscured water. Like every language adapting to noise, cuttlefish communication becomes louder, more expressive, more dramatic when clarity fades. The camera transitions to a nighttime scene where cuttlefish navigate waters clouded by coastal development. Sediment plumes drift from dredged channels, and the moonlight penetrates only faintly through the suspended particles. Here, cuttlefish behave with heightened caution. Their camouflage becomes darker, less patterned, more reliant on silhouettes. They flatten their bodies, reducing the shadows they cast. Predators like sharks and seals use movement in low visibility to detect prey, so cuttlefish minimize fin motion, relying on subtle mantle pulses instead. This behavior showcases a different layer of adaptation, not just how they change their appearance, but how they adjust their physical movements to avoid drawing attention in murky water. The camera returns to brighter shallows where sunlight filters through clearer patches. Here, cuttlefish participate in courtship rituals. Females glide gracefully, their skin shifting in slow, mesmerizing waves. Males flank them, bodies stiffened, displaying shimmering zebra patterns on one side, while keeping the opposite side neutral to avoid provoking rival males on their blind spot. But even in these clearer zones, light behaves unpredictably due to suspended particles drifting in and out with currents. The cuttlefish adjust accordingly. When a cloud of sediment passes, the patterns become bolder. When light returns, signals soften. The entire display is a conversation between animal and environment, repeated hundreds of times each day. The biological machinery behind these adaptations is equally remarkable. Each cuttlefish carries tens of thousands of pigment cells arranged in layered structures. Chromatophores function as pixel-like units, expanding or contracting to control color. Iridophores reflect light, producing shimmering blues and greens. Leucophores scatter light, acting as a base layer. This structure allows them to match almost any background, but only if their environment is predictable. In a world where clarity changes hourly, cuttlefish must constantly recalibrate the relationship between these layers. When murk increases, they engage more chromatophores. When clarity returns, they leverage iridophores to restore detailed gradients. Their skin is not just reactive, it is predictive, responding to light conditions that are shifting earlier in the day, earlier in the season, and earlier in life. Life stages themselves are now changing. Studies show that cuttlefish adjust growth rates depending on temperature. Warmer waters accelerate metabolism. Juveniles grow faster, mature earlier, and reproduce sooner. This might seem beneficial, but accelerated growth compresses life cycles, shortening the window for learning crucial behaviors. Young cuttlefish must master camouflage, hunting, and social signaling in a shorter period. They perform these skills under environmental stress their ancestors never experienced. The result is a form of evolutionary triage. Individuals that learn quickly thrive, while slower learners fall behind. In cooler refuges, the opposite occurs. When temperatures drop due to upwelling or cold currents, cuttlefish slow down their development, delaying maturity. This gives them more time to learn, but also exposes them longer to predators. Temperature fluctuations, which once aligned neatly with seasonal cycles, now occur unpredictably. A warm patch one week, a cold upwelling the next. These fluctuations rewrite the cuttlefish's biological schedule. Every generation grows under a slightly different clock, shaping behavior and physiology in ways that accumulate rapidly. The camera glides into a rocky cove transformed by construction runoff. The water is cloudy, yet structural complexity remains. Boulders, crevices, algae stands. Here, cuttlefish invent new camouflage types. Individuals experiment with novel pattern mixes, blending colors in ways rarely seen in clear water habitats. One produces a mottled, dark-on-light patchwork resembling sedimented algae. Another shifts to bright, high-contrast flashes to stun small fish in the low-light environment. The experimentation is constant. Cuttlefish rarely commit to a single tactic. They test, refine, abandon, and reinvent with every shift in water quality. Predation reinforces this process. In clearer waters, cuttlefish rely on fine detail to disappear. In murkier waters, they rely on boldness or stillness. Some even adopt disruptive patterns that mimic floating debris or decaying algae mats. These strategies succeed only if predators fail to decode them, and predators are adapting too. Fish accustomed to hunting in clear water now rely more on lateral line sensors. Seals hunting in murky bays rely less on sight and more on sound and pressure. This pushes cuttlefish into even more extreme behavioral flexibility, adjusting their camouflage not only to light conditions, but to predator sensory modalities. The camera moves to deeper water, where algae blooms thin and light becomes filtered and blue. Cuttlefish hunting here display a different adaptation. They emphasize iridophore-driven flashes to disorient prey. In moderate clarity, reflections carry farther than color. Their skin becomes a disk of shifting silver and blue that distracts prey long enough for a rapid strike. These flashes might not work in turbid water or in bright shallows, but here in this intermediate zone they are lethal. This specificity reveals an important truth. Cuttlefish do not use a single universal camouflage strategy. They maintain an entire library of visual tactics, drawing from it depending on environmental constraints. The camera approaches a juvenile cuttlefish hiding inside a discarded plastic container. The container, half buried in sand, creates a den where the animal learns the early foundations of camouflage. Artificial light from the surface filters through the translucent plastic, refracting strangely. The young cuttlefish practices shape-shifting in this warped light, a training ground it would never have encountered before human pollution, and yet it thrives. Using artificial structures as nurseries, it learns to read distorted luminosity, a skill that may benefit it in unpredictable underwater lighting conditions outside. The final wide shot spans an underwater landscape where clarity shifts like weather. Sunbeams break through suspended sediment. Green clouds bloom with algae. Rocky ledges form pockets of clear water. Across this patchwork, cuttlefish drift like restless artists, painting themselves anew every moment. Their survival does not depend on a single strategy, but on their ability to rewrite strategies with each change in light. In an ocean where visibility collapses, where seasons scramble, where temperature bends life cycles, the cuttlefish adapts. Its skin becomes a language rewritten by murkier water. Its signals become bolder, sharper, more adaptive. Its life cycle accelerates or slows to match the chaotic rhythm of warming seas. The cuttlefish is not just a creature of color, it is a creature of change. a living screen adjusting to an ocean whose light, chemistry, and seasons shift too quickly for most animals to follow. But with every pulse of pigment, every experiment in contrast, every generation born under a different environmental script, the cuttlefish evolves in real time, proof that adaptation can be as fluid and immediate as the water it moves through. At the bottom of the world, where the wind carries the weight of an entire frozen continent, a faint blue glow spreads across the horizon long before the sun appears. This is the edge of the Southern Ocean, a boundary not drawn on maps but forged daily as temperatures fluctuate and sea ice advances or retreats. To most animals, this shifting front is hostile, unpredictable, and uninhabitable. To penguins, it is home. It is a nursery, a hunting ground, and a treacherous stage where survival depends on the distance between ice and open water. And now, in a warming century, that distance has become a moving target, a treadmill that forces penguins to adapt or vanish. The camera sinks into the wind-driven sea where loose pancakes of ice collide and fracture. Beneath them, the water is a chaotic mix of plankton blooms, krill swarms, and cold currents that surge upward from the deep. Historically, penguins timed their breeding cycles to match the rhythm of these currents. When sea ice expanded during winter, it sheltered juvenile krill from predators and nurtured algae beneath the frozen surface. When spring arrived and the ice melted, the krill would emerge in immense pulses, providing the energy-rich foundation on which penguin chicks depended. But nothing follows the old schedule anymore. Heat penetrates deeper into the Southern Ocean each year. Some regions of sea ice break apart weeks early, others fail to form entirely. The camera follows a colony of emperor penguins, the species most tightly bound to the ice. Their entire breeding strategy hinges on stability. Adults march inland to nesting sites shielded from storms by gently rising ice shelves. They huddle through the dark Antarctic winter, balancing eggs on their feet to keep them from freezing. Historically, this ice platform remained intact until chicks were strong enough to molt and swim. Now, the melt often begins before chicks can survive in the frigid ocean. Breeding colonies have collapsed when early thaw leaves thousands of chicks stranded on disintegrating floes. The ice does not wait for biology. It melts when temperature crosses a threshold, regardless of whether a generation is ready. Farther north, Adelie penguins, once iconic symbols of Antarctic stability, face their own crisis. Their colonies were historically anchored to coastal zones where pack ice lingered beyond the breeding season, ensuring that adults had reliable access to krill. But as warming accelerates, the timing and spacing of the ice shifts. Some years, the ice remains too long, forcing penguins to travel extreme distances from their nests to the open water where prey is accessible. Other years, the ice retreats too quickly, reducing krill production and leaving adults to hunt harder for less. These mismatches between climate, prey, and breeding demands are subtle but deadly. A penguin that must travel twice as far burns twice as much energy, returning to the nest with half the food. The camera tracks an Adelie adult launching from a rocky shoreline at dawn. It moves through the water with a smoothness that betrays evolutionary perfection. Wings transformed into flippers, body streamlined like a living torpedo. But evolution does not provide shortcuts around physics. When ice retreats, hunting zones shift farther offshore. The penguin must commute, sometimes increasing its trip by tens of kilometers. To us, the extra distance is an inconvenience. To a penguin feeding a rapidly growing chick, it is a biological deadline. Every hour spent traveling is an hour the chick waits without food. Delays add up. Chicks become underweight. Many fail to survive the stormy weeks before fledging, yet while some colonies shrink, others expand. The Southern Ocean is not warming evenly. In certain regions, reduced sea ice opens new feeding opportunities. Gen 2 penguins, a species far more flexible in diet and habitat, are moving southward into areas abandoned by adelies. Gen 2s thrive where open water is accessible year-round. They eat fish, squid, and krill in varied proportions, adjusting to what the sea offers. As the ice edge shifts poleward, Gen 2s follow it like a shadow. Their colonies expand, their numbers rise. In places once dominated by ice-loving species, Gen 2s now carve out territory, marking a quiet reorganization of the Antarctic ecosystem. This southward expansion represents a biological range mutation, not in genes but in behavior and territory. A species once confined to milder Antarctic fringes now pushes deeper toward the continent itself, chasing conditions that its ancestors rarely encountered. The pattern echoes changes across the globe, species tracking climate shifts as if stepping stones appear and disappear before them. The penguin's world is no longer defined by geography, but by the temperature threshold of ice formation. The camera dives beneath a freshly broken ice sheet. Sunlight filters through cracks, illuminating plumes of algae suspended like emerald dust. Krill gather here, feeding on this under-ice productivity. But the amount of algae depends on how long ice persists. With fewer stable ice platforms, algae blooms shrink. Krill populations fluctuate wildly. This unpredictability forces penguins to adjust their diets. Some populations now consume more fish and less krill. Others rely on amphipods or small squid that occupy deeper zones when surface conditions falter. These dietary changes ripple across the food web. Krill-eating penguins grow more slowly. Fish-eating penguins must dive deeper and longer, increasing their risk of predation by leopard seals. Chicks fed a mixed diet develop different fat reserves and thermal properties. The classic Antarctic penguin, dependent on krill and stable ice, is already becoming rarer. What replaces it is a patchwork of new behaviors, new diets, and new migration-like patterns as penguins follow the retreating ice edge each year. In some regions, parents leave the colony earlier than usual because fish schools shift to cooler pockets. This early departure means chicks are left alone slightly before reaching optimal independence. While many survive, the margin for error narrows. A storm, a cold snap, or a predator encounter becomes far more dangerous. Climate change does not need to wipe out a colony instantly. It erodes stability, one timing mismatch at a time. The camera moves to a stretch of coast where a once thriving Adelie colony now stands almost silent. Abandoned nests scatter the rocky ground. Bones of past generations lie half buried in silt. This site, rich for centuries, now fails to support birds because sea ice retreats too early and krill production has collapsed. But only a few kilometers south, on a colder stretch of coastline, a new Adelie colony grows. Penguins adapt not by altering physiology, but by relocating, chasing pockets of the Southern Ocean that still behave like the past. Their lives hinge on the narrow distance between solid ice and open water. When that distance shifts, the colony itself must shift. The ice edge is not simply a physical boundary, it is a biological engine. It determines where krill spawn, where fish concentrate, where predators hunt, and where penguins can safely dive. When the line moves, everything moves. Emperor penguins attempt to adjust by varying the timing of their breeding, arriving at nesting grounds earlier in the season when ice is more stable. But earlier breeding means chicks must face the harshest winter temperatures before adults form full huddles. Later breeding risks losing nests to early melt. There is no perfect timing anymore, only a narrowing window of possibility. Even within a species, different colonies respond differently. Some emperor colonies attempt to relocate onto thicker ice shelves after losing traditional breeding platforms. Others fail to find alternatives, declining rapidly. The ability to adapt depends on local geography, sea ice dynamics, and sheer luck. The penguins that succeed today may be ancestors of tomorrow's dominant lineages. The ones that fail are evolutionary branches abruptly cut short, not through natural competition or predation, but through a shifting climate that alters the rules of survival. As the camera follows a group of penguins diving beneath melting flows, a deeper truth emerges. Penguins are not simply victims of climate instability. They are indicators, biological sensors that reveal the state of the Southern Ocean. Their choices reflect the availability of prey. Their breeding success mirrors the stability of ice. Their movement patterns outline the shifting boundaries of a warming world. When penguins travel farther, it means prey has retreated. When colonies expand south, it means the ice line has moved. When chicks fail to fledge, it signals a mismatch between climate timing and biological timing. In one final sweeping shot, the camera pulls back to reveal the entire frozen frontier, an undulating edge of ice stretching toward the South Pole. It moves each year like a living entity, a border reshaped by temperature, wind, and ocean currents. Penguins gather along this line, marching, diving, hunting, and breeding in rhythm with forces far larger than themselves. Their lives depend on the position of a boundary they cannot control, yet must follow with absolute precision. For species whose hunting platform, nursery, and shelter all come from ice, a shifting ice line is not just environmental change, it is an evolutionary treadmill. Those who keep pace survive, those who fall behind disappear. And as the Southern Ocean continues to warm, the treadmill accelerates, testing every penguin's ability to chase the ice, adapt to new prey, and reclaim a place in an ecosystem rewriting itself in real time. The Arctic coastline at midsummer carries a strange, unsettling quiet. Waves break against gravel in soft, repetitive motions, and wind moves across the tundra in low ripples that barely bend the sparse vegetation. For centuries, this shoreline was an empty threshold, a place too exposed, too barren, and too distant from the drifting ice platforms that walruses relied upon. The great herds stayed offshore, perched on floating ice sheets that drifted above the rich seafloors where clams, worms, and amphipods thrived. The ice was their hunting platform, their nursery, and their sanctuary. But the ice is withdrawing, melting earlier each season and forming later each winter. And the walruses have followed the retreating edge until there is nowhere left to go. Now the coastline, once avoided, has become their only remaining refuge. The camera drifts above a remote headland. What appears at first to be a long, uneven strip of rock glistening in the sun slowly resolves into something alive. Thousands of walruses blanket the shore so densely that individuals are indistinguishable from one another. Their bodies pile in sprawling, shifting masses, each animal trying to claim a patch of land among its neighbors. Adults grunt and jostle for space, while calves attempt to wedge themselves between the safety of larger bodies. The smell of salt, musk, and drying kelp mixes with the deep, rhythmic calls echoing across the beach. Mass haulouts of this magnitude were once rare events, occurring only when temporary winds forced walruses to land. Today, they occur annually across Russia, Alaska, and northern Canada, sometimes involving tens of thousands of animals. These gatherings are not signs of abundance, but of desperation. Without sea ice, the walrus cannot rest in the offshore waters where it feeds. It must come to land, even when land is crowded, exposed, and dangerous. The shoreline becomes an immense pressure cooker. The camera glides through the packed mass, capturing subtle tensions. A startled female shifts her weight. A bull rolls to scratch his flipper. A calf attempts to squeeze past an adult twice its size. Any sudden movement, any unexpected sound can cascade through the herd like a shockwave. When panic erupts, the consequences are catastrophic. Walruses stampede toward the sea in massive waves, crushing calves beneath their weight and injuring countless others. In some years, hundreds of carcasses are found at the base of cliffs or piled along the high tide line, victims not of predators, but of the herd's instinctive response to fear in a landscape that offers no room to escape. The camera pulls back to reveal how this once rare behavior is transforming the species' relationship with the Arctic. Walruses historically spent most of their year on drifting ice platforms that followed the seasons. Ice allowed them to forage efficiently, diving repeatedly onto productive seafloors without needing to swim long distances back to land. It also protected calves from terrestrial dangers. When the ice melts early, adults must swim farther to reach feeding grounds, burning valuable energy. When forced to haul out on land instead of ice, calves rest in unpredictable conditions. They face not only stampede risk, but also new predators. Polar bears, deprived of sea ice for their own hunting, now patrol the beaches where walruses rest. The bears once primarily hunted seals from the ice. But as ice becomes unreliable, they increasingly approach walrus haulouts. A single bear can trigger a stampede simply by appearing near the edge of the herd. When walruses flee, the bear often secures a calf or an injured adult without expending much energy. In some regions, orcas have also learned to patrol the shallow waters near beach haulouts, capturing weakened walruses that enter the sea in large numbers. The walrus, a formidable giant in the water, becomes vulnerable during the chaos of mass movement. Below the surface, the walrus's world is changing just as rapidly. The camera dives into shallow coastal waters stirred by thousands of flippers. Walruses, forced into nearshore zones by the lack of ice, begin foraging in areas they once rarely visited. Their feeding technique, one of the most impressive in the marine world, involves using powerful jets of water to excavate clams buried deep beneath the sediment. Their sensitive whiskers detect vibrations as they sweep along the sea floor. When they locate prey, they create a vacuum with their mouths strong enough to extract clam meat without breaking the shell. But in shallow areas repeatedly disturbed by massive walrus herds, the seafloor suffers. Sediments churn into suspension, smothering organisms. Clam beds become depleted. These disruptions alter the balance of benthic communities, affecting everything from worms to fish that once relied on stable seafloors. The walruses themselves feel the consequences. As the nearshore feeding grounds degrade, they must travel farther and spend more time searching for prey, compounding energy loss created by the absence of ice. The camera shifts to a mother walrus, guiding her calf into deeper water. Calves depend heavily on their mothers for warmth, security, and guidance. The mother teaches the calf where food is found, how to rest safely, and how to avoid predators. But increased land haulouts disrupt these rhythms. Calves tire more easily after repeated stampedes. They struggle to learn essential foraging behaviors when their mothers are forced to search longer and farther. Some calves drown after being separated during panic rushes to the sea. Others grow slowly due to inconsistent access to milk and food. In regions where haulouts occur near steep cliffs, the danger increases even further. Walruses have poor depth perception on land, especially in crowded conditions. In some tragic events, they have climbed high slopes to find relief from the crush of bodies, only to fall or attempt to descend toward the water again. These falls, often fatal, are among the starkest visual symbols of how climate change distorts natural behavior. The camera pans across a coastal plain, marked by deep trenches in the sand, signs of recent foraging by walruses pushed into the shallows. As they root through these coastal zones with increasing frequency, they alter sediment dynamics, reshaping underwater landscapes that evolved for centuries without this level of disturbance. New species of algae and filter feeders begin to colonize areas once dominated by clams. Fish that depend on intact soft sediment habitats shift their ranges, sometimes disappearing entirely from affected bays. The walrus, once a sculptor of offshore benthic ecosystems, now inadvertently reshapes the coastal Arctic instead. Yet amid the difficulties, the walrus displays a kind of rugged determination. Their thick hides, brawny forelimbs, and enormous tusks evolved for life on ice, but can be repurposed for rocky beaches. Their social bonds remain strong even in crowded conditions. Mothers shield calves beneath their bodies. Bulls maintain hierarchies that reduce unnecessary fights. Their whiskers remain finely tuned to detect prey, even as habitats shift. In the water, they remain agile divers capable of reaching depths of more than 100 meters, though today they often focus on shallower zones. The camera moves far offshore to areas where sea ice still persists in thin, fractured sheets. A smaller group of walruses rests on a drifting floe, the kind of platform that once supported whole herds. These patches are remnants of a world fading piece by piece. The walruses here feed more efficiently, diving repeatedly onto intact clam beds and surfacing to rest close to their feeding grounds. This is the life the species was evolved for. A life balanced between ocean and ice, between foraging and resting. But these flows have grown scarce, and their southern boundary retreats each decade. Some walrus populations try to follow the ice north, but the Arctic basin offers fewer shallow feeding grounds. The deep seafloor does not support the benthic prey they rely upon. The walrus cannot evolve into a deep diving predator in 1 or 2 generations. It must either adapt behaviorally or face declining reproductive success. For now, the species attempts to adjust through sheer endurance, longer swims, new haul-out sites, altered feeding territories, and more frequent use of coastal ecosystems. The final shot pulls outward, revealing the stark contrast of the modern Arctic. On one side lies a crowded beach, overflowing with walruses pressed against one another for lack of ice. On the other, a vast expanse of open water where ice once floated as a stable, drifting platform. The walrus stands, or rather lies, at the center of this transformation. An animal shaped by ice is being forced into a world where ice is no longer dependable. Its survival strategy mutates each year as it contends with coastal dangers, altered food webs, increased predation, and the relentless disappearance of its drifting home. Walruses are not simply losing ice. They are losing time, space, and the ecological predictability that once defined their existence. In the Arctic of the 21st century, survival is no longer about withstanding cold. It is about adapting to the absence of what once made the cold survivable. And as the ice retreats farther and faster, the walrus will continue to chase the edge, not because it chooses to, but because the rhythm of its life was built on a platform that is melting beneath it. The shoreline at dawn is a place of fractured rhythms. Waves arrive in uneven sets, kelp fronds drift like torn banners, and the cry of seabirds carries the uneasy sharpness of ecosystems under pressure. Along this cold, restless edge floats one of the ocean's most unlikely engineers, the sea otter. Wrapped in one of the densest coats in the animal kingdom, anchored to the swaying kelp by nothing but a loose grip of paws, the otter seems almost delicate at first glance. But beneath that softness lies a predator shaped by scarcity, disruption, and endless improvisation. The sea otter survives not by force of size or speed, but by flexibility. And in a century of collapsing food webs, this adaptability is becoming not just its secret weapon, but a force capable of reshaping entire coastlines. The camera drifts beneath the mat of kelp until the green canopy overhead becomes a filtered ceiling of wavering light. In the understory, purple and red urchins cover the rocks like scattered marbles. A decade ago, many coastlines were dominated by large, nutrient-heavy urchins and abalone, prey so rich that a single otter could meet much of its caloric needs with only a few deep dives. But repeated marine heat waves, disease outbreaks, and human harvesting have hollowed these populations. The classic prey, the big, slow, predictable targets, have become rarer. In their place rise armies of small, nutritionally poorer urchins, immune to the die-offs that eliminated their larger relatives. Abalone, once a staple for otters in regions like California and Alaska, have declined to fractions of their former abundance. When faced with this ecological collapse, the otter does not wait for recovery. It adapts. Its entire hunting strategy flexes around whatever remains. The camera follows a female as she pushes through kelp fronds. She tilts her head, listening for the faint scrape of a crab scuttling across stone. Crabs once played a minor role in her diet. Now, in some regions, they dominate it. As she dives, her body becomes streamlined, fur trapping an insulating layer of air that prevents heat loss in the frigid water. She reaches into a narrow crevice and extracts a rock crab, its claws flaring uselessly in the shadow of her efficiency. This shift to crustaceans is no simple substitution. It sends ripples across the ecosystem. Crab populations fall when otters increase predation, allowing snails and other herbivores to rebound, altering the balance of kelp, algae, and grazing pressure in unpredictable ways. Other otters make different choices. Some turn to snails, pulling them from kelp blades or rocky outcroppings and cracking them against stones balanced on their chests. This behavior, tool use, is not new, but its frequency and context are changing. Where abalone and large urchins once required heavy pounding, snails require finer manipulation. Otters adjust grip strength, angle of strike, and the stones they choose. Pups watch every movement, memorizing sequences with the intensity of apprentices learning a craft. The result is a generational shift in both diet and skill set, passed not through genes but through the intimate ritual of mother and pup learning side by side. The camera shifts deeper into the kelp forest where a shadow glides across the rock. An octopus emerges from a den, its arms exploring the world with cautious sweeps. For many years, octopuses were peripheral prey for otters. Difficult to catch, slippery, and dangerous when large. But as easy prey dwindles, some otters have grown more skilled at hunting them. They anticipate the octopus's escape routes, block entrances to dens, or flush them out by pulling stones aside. When an otter seizes the octopus, It keeps the animal at arm's length, avoiding the instinctive grip of tentacles that could wrap around its face. This new predation pressure forces octopuses to shift hiding behaviors, a reminder that even one predator's dietary pivot can reshape how other species behave. The mosaic of diet changes produces wildly different consequences depending on the coastline. In some regions, otter recovery has led to the resurgence of kelp forests. With sea urchin populations suppressed, kelp grows tall, creating dense underwater forests that shelter fish, invertebrates, and juvenile marine mammals. In these places, otters are ecosystem restorers, reversing decades of decline caused by overgrazing. But the story is not universally positive. In other regions, the rise of small, nutritionally weak urchins creates vast urchin barrens, patches of seafloor scraped to the bone where kelp cannot regrow. Even with otters present, these barrens persist because small urchins hide deep in crevices where otters cannot reach, emerging at night to scrape away the youngest kelp sprouts. In these ecosystems, otter predation on alternative prey, like crabs or snails, accidentally releases new grazing pressures, sometimes allowing novel algae species to dominate. This duality reflects the messy, unpredictable nature of ecological collapse. Otters are not heroes or villains. They are dynamic participants in a food web that no longer behaves according to historical rules. As each population adapts to its own mix of prey, climate effects, and human impacts, the otter's role becomes more variable, more experimental, and more revealing of how coastal systems are unraveling and reforming simultaneously. The camera shifts toward a small fishing village. Crab pots line the pier, stacked neatly beside coils of rope. In these waters, otters have learned that crab pots are not simply traps for fishermen. They are invitations. Some individuals specialize in raiding pots. They dive beneath the buoys, locate the entrances, and slip inside with acrobatic ease. Once inside, they snatch crabs trapped against the mesh. In some regions, otters have even learned to open bait boxes inside the pots, exploiting human-designed lures to access energy-rich prey. Fishermen find pots emptied or torn apart, and though the conflict creates tension, it also reveals the otter's astonishing capacity for innovation. This behavior spreads socially. One pioneering otter figures out how to bypass the pot entrance. Others observe, mimic, and refine the tactic. Mothers pass the behavior to pups, creating microcultures that persist across generations. In some places, otters have learned to steal fish directly from nets or seize them from lines as fishermen haul in their gear. These behaviors require precise timing and boldness, demonstrating not desperation, but cognitive adaptation. When the food web breaks, otters do not passively wait for reassembly. They invent new ways to feed within the altered system. Back underwater, the kelp forest shifts again. The camera approaches a region where otters have heavily focused on crabs, reducing their numbers dramatically. The absence of crabs allows snails to proliferate. These snails graze not just on algae, but also on microscopic layers that stabilize kelp holdfasts. With more snails, holdfasts weaken. Storms rip kelp from its anchor points more easily. The forest thins. This cascade shows how otters, by becoming more reliant on crustaceans due to climate-driven prey loss, can inadvertently create new vulnerabilities in kelp ecosystems. The otter's role is not fixed. It changes depending on what the ocean offers or withholds. In yet another coastline, the opposite occurs. Otters maintain pressure on both snails and crabs, preventing any one herbivore from dominating. Here, kelp flourishes. Its dense canopy shades the water, reducing temperatures and providing localized refuges against warming events. Fish return, seabirds follow. Orcas occasionally appear, hunting otters along the edges of the forest. The otters themselves become part of a feedback loop where energy, nutrients, and predation pressure cycle through a system stabilizing itself in surprising ways. It is a reminder that ecosystems under stress do not collapse in uniform fashion. They splinter, adapt, and reorganize depending on the interplay of predators and prey. As the camera follows the female otter carrying the crab she caught, a pup rides on her chest. The pup watches every movement, how she flips the crab, how she holds the shell away from her face, how she uses a stone to crack the carapace. This moment, repeated countless times, is how new ecological roles form. The pup will grow up knowing a coastline without abundant abalone or large urchins. Its baseline world is one of scarcity and mosaic food webs. What it learns now will shape not just its own survival, but the structure of the entire forest around it. Some pups will become crab specialists, others will learn to pry loose hidden snails. Others still may master the art of octopus hunting or net raiding. Their individuality becomes part of the ecosystem's evolving fabric. The chapter nears its conclusion as the camera rises above the kelp canopy, showing a patchwork landscape. Some areas are lush and full, swaying like underwater meadows. Others are barren, stripped by urchins or overtaken by algae species that thrive in warm, nutrient-poor conditions. Through this fragmented world float the otters, each carving out its own niche. They are adaptive, clever, constantly rewriting their approach to feeding as human impacts and climate shocks reshape the coast. Sea otters were once nearly extinguished by hunting. They survived by chance, by remote refuges, by scattered pockets that escaped exploitation. Today, they survive through adaptability. Their ability to switch prey, invent tactics, and reshape habitats gives them a resilience few marine mammals possess. But this same resilience makes them agents of change, sometimes restoring forests, sometimes altering them in unexpected ways, and sometimes accelerating transitions already set in motion by warming seas and human pressure. What the otter ultimately reveals is not a tidy story of ecological recovery, but a more honest one. Ecosystems under stress mutate, and predators mutate with them. The food web is no longer stable, but the sea otter refuses to be anchored to the past. It adapts, improvises, teaches, and reshapes. Its story is the story of a coastline rewriting itself in real time. One dive, one cracked shell, and one passing generation at a time. The open ocean at sunrise looks deceptively pure. A blue horizon uninterrupted by land, birds, or ships. But drifting just beneath the surface is a different reality. A patchwork of life and debris woven together by wind, current, and human neglect. This is the nursery of the modern green sea turtle. What once consisted of tangled mats of sargassum, drifting logs, and delicate rafts of algae has transformed into a hybrid habitat where threads of plastic rope coil through kelp, bottle caps float like bright pebbles, and translucent fragments swirl among natural detritus. To the small turtles that hatch on distant beaches and swim toward the open ocean, these floating slicks are both refuge and hazard, a training ground for survival in a world humans have altered beyond recognition. The camera follows a hatchling's journey from the shoreline. It swims feverishly, propelled by instinct alone, its small flippers beating like wings in the water. For the first hours of its life at sea, it is a target for everything. Fish, birds, even shifting currents that can sweep it back ashore. But eventually the water darkens, shadows deepen. The hatchling approaches the convergence zone where drifting material gathers. Here the waves form long, linear slicks that stretch for kilometers. Historically, these slicks were safe havens. Sargassum offered camouflage, structure, and a buffet of tiny crustaceans. Today, something else floats beside the sargassum. Strips of plastic film that flutter like jellyfish, hardened fragments shaped by sunlight, and pellets of polyethylene that mimic fish eggs. The juvenile turtle enters this ecosystem cautiously. It inspects pieces of drifting matter with light taps of its beak, tasting chemical signatures carried in the film of water around each object. Some items carry the scent of life, microorganisms, algae, or hydroids colonizing a plastic bottle exactly as they would colonize driftwood. These micro-communities create a deceptive sense of normalcy. Plastic becomes habitat, not because it belongs, but because life adapts to what remains. For a small turtle, the distinction between natural and artificial dissolves. Refuge is refuge. Something to hide beneath is something to hide beneath. As the camera pans outward, the full extent of this new nursery becomes clear. Items lost from fisheries, shipping, and coastal runoff gather into floating mosaics. Seaweed tangles around fishing line. Small fish hide under the shade of foam packaging. Crabs cling to the underside of a drifting crate. And among it all, Dozens of young turtles drift together, feeding, resting, and learning the rhythms of the ocean. This new surface world is neither entirely natural nor entirely synthetic. It is a hybrid ecosystem in which green sea turtles now complete the earliest, most vulnerable stages of their development. The shift in nursery structure is not the only transformation shaping their lives. Beneath the slicks, prey availability is changing. Historically, young green turtles consumed a mixture of pelagic invertebrates before slowly transitioning to seagrass and algae as they aged. But climate-driven declines in seagrass beds, caused by marine heat waves, nutrient runoff, and coastal construction, alter this transition. In warmer regions, some seagrass meadows bleach much like coral reefs, losing pigmentation and structural strength. In other places, the beds disappear entirely after prolonged exposure to high temperatures. As this crucial food source vanishes or weakens, turtles become more dependent on soft-bodied prey in the open ocean. This shift in diet has cascading consequences. Jellyfish, once only a small portion of a juvenile's intake, now form a significant part of the diet in regions where seagrass loss is severe. Jellyfish populations often bloom in warmer, nutrient-rich waters, the same conditions that degrade seagrass. For turtles, this creates a strange feedback loop. The more the ecosystem falters, the more jellyfish proliferate and the more turtles depend on them. Their feeding centers around the upper layers of the water column, where jellies pulse beneath slicks of plastic film that drift like broken echoes of their translucent bodies. The danger is not simply confusion. Many soft plastics resemble jellyfish in texture and movement. A drifting plastic bag undulates in the current exactly like a small moon jelly. To a turtle relying increasingly on soft prey, the boundaries between food and hazard blur. Ingested plastics accumulate in the gut, reduce nutrient absorption, and create blockages that interfere with buoyancy, a deadly combination for an animal that depends on diving and resurfacing with precise rhythm. Yet despite these threats, the turtles persist. Their biology is built for endurance. Their digestive systems have survived millennia of feeding on tough seagrasses laced with silica. Their lungs can collapse safely during deep dives. Their metabolism slows in cold water, allowing them to drift for hours with minimal energy use. Resilience is woven into their physiology, but resilience is not immunity. The environment now tests them in ways evolution did not anticipate. The camera shifts toward a nesting beach where another critical transformation unfolds. Here, beneath the surface of the sand, temperature determines destiny. Green sea turtles exhibit temperature-dependent sex determination. Warmer nests produce more females, cooler nests produce more males. Historically, the balance varied naturally with shade cover, moisture, and local climate, but rising global temperatures tilt the system dangerously. On many beaches, nest temperatures exceed thresholds that produce predominantly female hatchlings. Entire nesting seasons yield almost no males. This shift creates a demographic time bomb. In the short term, high female output increases reproductive potential. But in the long term, the scarcity of males threatens genetic diversity and population viability. Scientists have recorded nesting beaches where more than 9 out of every 10 hatchlings are female, a skew so extreme that natural adaptation cannot keep pace. While turtles can travel long distances and mix across regions, they cannot change the fundamental biology of their sex determination. The environment writes their genetic future through heat. Some nesting areas respond by producing deeper nests as sand composition shifts with storms or erosion. In other cases, shading from newly grown vegetation brings temperatures down slightly. But as climate warming accelerates, these natural buffers may prove insufficient. Human interventions like shading nests or relocating eggs help temporarily but cannot solve the underlying issue. In this way, evolution is being forcibly redirected not through genetic mutation, but through temperature, an environmental constraint shaping demographic destiny. Back at the surface slicks, the juvenile turtles continue navigating their altered nursery. The camera focuses on the interplay of sunlight and debris. Algae grow on plastic ropes, creating miniature ecosystems that mimic natural rafts. Small fish graze these growths, and turtles chase the fish. These interactions reveal a strange truth. Even in damaged ecosystems, new ecological relationships form. Some juvenile turtles gain additional refuge from predators among the dense debris. Some find food in unexpected places. Others develop new foraging behaviors that previous generations never needed. The danger emerges from scale. A single slick may support life, but the global ocean now contains countless areas where plastic outweighs natural debris. Ingestion becomes more likely. Entanglement becomes common. And unseen toxins leaching from plastics enter the food chain, accumulating in tissues over time. For a species that lives for decades and migrates thousands of kilometers, bioaccumulated toxins can influence growth, fertility, and immune health. The camera follows a larger juvenile as it transitions from offshore nursery to coastal feeding grounds. It approaches a seagrass meadow, recovering after a series of destructive heat waves. The meadow is patchy, dotted with algae species that thrive in warmer water. The turtle grazes cautiously, selecting the healthiest blades. This selective feeding helps stimulate new growth, a small contribution to meadow resilience. In places where turtle populations remain stable, this grazing activity helps maintain the health of seagrass beds. But in areas where beds are collapsing faster than turtles can adapt, the animals must continue supplementing their diet with jellyfish or drift zone organisms. Their role shifts from ecosystem gardeners to opportunistic feeders, reflecting the instability of their environment. In some warming bays, turtles turn increasingly to algae that were once secondary food sources. These algae spread across shallows where seagrass can no longer survive. While the algae offer calories, they lack the nutritional profile of seagrass, potentially altering turtle metabolism and growth. Over long timescales, turtles that rely more heavily on algae may exhibit changes in digestive efficiency or foraging patterns. These shifts represent the earliest stages of an evolutionary divergence, not yet genetic, but behavioral, setting the stage for future adaptation. As the juvenile turtle returns to the offshore slicks, a storm approaches, winds increase, currents intensify. The slicks begin to fracture, scattering debris and organisms across wide areas. Storms used to briefly disrupt nurseries but rarely erased them. Now, with climate change intensifying storm frequency and power, the slicks become temporary refuges rather than stable developmental zones. Turtles must navigate between fragments, learning to survive with fewer constant anchors. This instability shapes their early development, fostering behaviors more flexible, more exploratory, and more opportunistic. In the final wide shot, the camera rises above the drifting hybrid ecosystems. Young turtles float beneath a film of debris and sargassum, feeding, resting, and learning to survive in a world where natural and artificial have fused. They are not simply victims of pollution or climate change. They are participants in a new ocean, one reshaped by human influence, but still governed by the ancient instincts of the creatures within it. Their nurseries are plastic-laced, their diets are shifting, their sex ratios are bending toward extremes. The forces shaping their evolution are no longer slow, geological cycles but rapid, human-driven transformations. Yet through it all, the green sea turtle persists, adapting, enduring, and navigating a changing sea, one fragile hatchling at a time. The first signal that something is shifting in the ocean does not come from storms or coral die-offs or news headlines. It comes from silence. The silence left behind when whales fail to appear where they have been expected for generations. For most of recorded history, humpback whales traced some of the longest, most predictable migrations on the planet. They left polar feeding grounds, traveled thousands of kilometers toward tropical nurseries, birthed calves, and returned north as the seasons turned. These routes were so stable that scientists once used them as a benchmark for ocean consistency. But the ocean is no longer consistent, and the humpback, one of the sea's most flexible giants, is beginning to rewrite its map. The camera glides across a high-latitude sea, where cold winds ripple the surface and dense clouds blur the horizon. It looks like a classic feeding ground, cold, nutrient-rich, and bursting with krill. Historically, these waters would empty as summer faded. Krill would retreat, currents would calm, and the whales would depart south in unison. Now, warming events and shifting wind patterns delay the seasonal shutdown. Pockets of food remain late into autumn, sometimes well into winter, and the humpbacks, sensing abundance through their finely tuned perception of sound and chemical gradients, linger. Some delay migration by weeks, others remain for the entire season. A handful appears to be abandoning long migrations altogether. This is not simple laziness. Migration for humpbacks is costly. They burn enormous fat stores to travel to warm nursery bays that offer safety rather than food. If feeding grounds remain rich and safe enough to rear calves, the incentive to migrate weakens. In certain regions, mothers have begun raising calves in temperate waters where they were almost never seen in previous decades. Researchers tracking these individuals with non-invasive suction tags have recorded shorter, more erratic seasonal movements, zigzag patterns instead of straight-shot migrations. These deviations mirror the new patchwork of productivity created by climate change. Upwelling zones, once predictable and narrow, are drifting. Warm eddies spin off larger currents unpredictably. Where warm and cold layers intersect, sudden blooms of anchovies and other forage fish erupt like spontaneous oases. The whales do not wait for a textbook season to begin. They go where the food is, even if that means rewriting centuries of tradition. The camera dives beneath a newly formed feeding hotspot. Here, warm water sliding over cooler currents pulls nutrients upward in a turbulent spiral. Clouds of anchovies pulse near the surface, ripple in density, then scatter at the faintest shadow. Into this frantic swarming the humpbacks arrive. Their massive bodies, each weighing as much as a dozen elephants, move with unexpected precision. This is where one of the most remarkable phenomena in animal behavior unfolds, the bubble net. Traditionally associated with krill-rich polar waters, bubble net feeding has begun to appear in places where schools of anchovies and sardines now gather in unusual abundance. But these new prey types behave differently than krill. They flee more quickly, change direction unpredictably, and form tighter escape balls. The whales must modify their approach. Within these feeding groups, observers have documented what can only be described as sensory workshops. Instead of repeating a single conserved technique, whales test variations. One group tightens the net, releasing bubbles in smaller spirals. Another makes wider circles, forcing prey outward before collapsing the ring. Some begin their ascent from deeper layers, using vertical pressure to compress the fish school from below. Others emit stronger, more elongated calls to corral prey using sound as much as bubbles. These calls are not random. Each note resonates at frequencies designed to manipulate fish behavior. The whales experiment with duration, intensity, and timing. They seem to be testing what combination works best for a newly encountered prey type. This is not instinct running blindly. It is innovation. Social learning applied at a scale so massive it feels almost architectural. Each whale contributes. Each attempt becomes a data point. When a method works, the rest of the group copies it. When it fails, they adjust. In biological terms, this is cultural evolution at hyperspeed, the kind that can reshape a population's behavior within only a few feeding seasons. In colder regions where krill stocks fluctuate due to heat waves, these innovation storms intensify. When food becomes unpredictable, creativity becomes survival. The camera shifts to a different coast, where a new phenomenon is taking shape. Humpbacks, long known for targeting krill and small schooling fish, are now hunting species that were once outside their normal repertoire. In certain warm temperate areas, rising sea temperatures have drawn anchovy and menhaden schools closer to shore, where tidal turbulence traps them against cliffs or underwater ridges. Humpbacks appear in these narrow coastal corridors earlier each season, sometimes months before they would traditionally pass through. Their arrival coincides not with time of year, but with density of prey. This marks a deeper shift. Migration no longer follows the calendar, it follows biomass. A whale's internal navigation system blends magnetoreception, spatial memory, and acoustic mapping. Historically, calves learned migration routes by swimming alongside their mothers, following an inherited corridor of deep water highways. Today, these corridors are fracturing. In some populations, young whales are growing up without completing the full historical migration. As a result, they are imprinting new default routes, ones shorter and more opportunistic. This does not mean they lose the ability to migrate. It means their mental map, their aquatic software, is updating. influenced by climate-stressed ocean patterns rather than age-old tradition. In the heart of these changing routes, bubble net groups continue refining their tactics. The camera descends into a swirl of rising bubbles, each a small burst of compressed air that expands as it climbs. The whales time their exhalations with uncanny precision. The net tightens. The fish hesitate, then cluster tightly, overwhelmed by the sudden acoustic and visual distortion. The whales rise with their jaws open wide, pleats expanding, engulfing entire walls of prey. But even this perfected sequence is undergoing modification. Some groups begin using two-tiered nets, one wide, one narrow, to pin anchovy schools more effectively. Others coordinate with sea lions or seabirds, taking advantage of the chaos they create. These interactions show a new layer of adaptability, multi-species opportunism. When prey behavior changes due to warming, mixing, or acidification-driven shifts in plankton availability, predators often respond individually. Humpbacks respond socially. They incorporate the behavior of other hunters into their own routines, amplifying efficiency. This cooperative flexibility becomes especially important in regions where prey distributions are volatile. If anchovy schools move unexpectedly into shallower water due to heat, the whales adjust. If krill rise earlier or linger later, the whales follow. If forage fish shift north along coastlines, the whales track them like mobile storms. This adaptability extends beyond feeding. It shapes the entire rhythm of humpback life. In parts of the southern hemisphere, some whales have begun compressing their migration timing, making shorter feeding to breeding loops, because food availability near temperate shores now lasts longer. In the northern hemisphere, others skip migration entirely, remaining near high-latitude feeding zones where warming prevents ice formation and krill blooms persist. This creates subpopulations with increasingly divergent behaviors. One group migrates traditionally, another migrates partially, a third becomes almost resident. Over time, these behavioral distinctions may lead to genetic divergence, but right now they are purely cultural, taught, not inherited. The camera shifts to the edge of a continental shelf. Here, warm and cold currents collide, generating turbulence that drives plankton upward. In the past, these intersections occurred predictably, anchored to seasonal wind cycles. Now they shift spatially and temporally, creating unpredictable hotspots, yet humpbacks find them with remarkable reliability. Their sensitivity to low-frequency sound lets them hear the distant roar of boiling prey schools. Their awareness of temperature gradients helps them detect where biological activity peaks. Their memory of past seasons gives them a mental library of potential hotspots to check. This combination functions like a natural GPS that updates in real time. The ability to remix migration routes, adjusting them according to a shifting ocean, is what allows humpbacks to thrive, while many marine species struggle. Migration, once a rigid loop, has become fluid. Feeding strategies, once inherited, have become experimental. Social learning, once slow, has accelerated. The whales are operating not on genetic timescales, but on cultural ones. This matters because climate is no longer stable enough for slow evolutionary responses. Species that cannot adjust behaviors quickly face collapse. Species that can, like the humpback, redefine what survival looks like. Toward the end of the chapter, the camera returns to a feeding group circling beneath a dome of bubbles. The whales rise again, bodies gliding upward like dark mountains emerging from night. This behavior, executed thousands of times across decades, is both ancient and newly transformed. The technique is old, the prey is new, the group cohesion is ancient, the tactical variations are novel. The migration routes that brought them here are remnants of tradition, heavily modified by environmental uncertainty. The message is clear. Humpbacks are no longer following the ocean, they are responding to it. Their software, the intangible code of memory, learning and social transmission, is updating as rapidly as the climate scrambles the sea. Where cold and warm layers meet, where food pulses unpredictably, where new opportunities arise, the humpbacks adjust without hesitation. They do not anchor themselves to past maps, they rewrite them. And as long as they continue remixing their routes and reinventing their strategies, these giants will remain one of the ocean's great survivors, navigating a world that changes faster each decade. yet still finding abundance within its shifting lines. The coastline looks almost artificial from above, a jagged seam of concrete piers, breakwaters, cargo terminals, and dredged shipping lanes stitched into the water like scars. It is a place shaped by engines, not tides. The sea here churns with the turbulence of human activity. Propeller wash, chemical runoff, drifting nets, and scattered islands of trash. Yet beneath the mechanical noise, something unexpected moves with the fluid precision of a creature built for far quieter worlds. Dolphins slip through this industrial labyrinth the way they once moved through unbroken reefs, weaving among hulls and pilings with uncanny ease. For them, the urban ocean is not a wasteland, but a restructured hunting ground, filled with new patterns, new hazards, and new opportunities. The camera descends into the shadow of a trawler, dragging a wide net through murky water. Metal scrapes against metal, engines thrum, and loose fish spill from the edges of the trawl like a drifting trail of breadcrumbs. A pod of dolphins materializes almost instantly. Their presence is not accidental. Over decades, coastal populations have learned to follow trawlers with the same consistency that wolves once shadowed migrating bison. Dolphins understand the entire choreography of fishing vessels. When they accelerate, when nets drop, when bycatch escapes, and when exhausted fish slip from mesh openings as the net rises. Each of these moments creates food. Each is predictable. And predictability, for an intelligent predator, is a currency more valuable than pristine habitat. Dolphin feeding behind trawlers is now documented on every continent where industrial fishing operates, but the behavior is not identical across regions. Different pods refine different tactics. Some stay hidden beneath boats, waiting for stunned fish drifting downward. Others position themselves behind the propeller's turbulence, where swirling currents gather herring or sardines into compact clusters. Still others time their approach to coincide with the moment nets lift from the bottom, releasing trapped crustaceans and benthic fish in a sudden plume. These techniques are not genetically programmed. They are learned, shared, adapted, and improved. Mothers teach calves, calves experiment, pods compare outcomes. Cultural evolution, accelerated by human disturbance, reshapes their strategies year after year. The camera shifts toward a shrimp boat lifting its catch at dusk. The surface is littered with discarded bycatch, unwanted fish, discarded shrimp, and shredded invertebrates tossed overboard. A group of dolphins circles the vessel, moving with deliberate precision. They dive and surface in synchronized arcs, intercepting the largest pieces before gulls descend. This behavior, once rare, is becoming routine. In some regions, dolphins now spend nearly half their feeding time around fishing operations. This has costs. Entanglements increase, propeller strikes are common, and nutritional shifts occur when dolphins consume too much processed bycatch. Yet they persist, because the efficiency of human-created feeding zones outweighs the risks. But the trawlers and shrimp boats tell only part of the story. The urban ocean contains stranger opportunities. When dredging barges scrape harbor floors, their giant buckets lift sediment, shell fragments, and buried animals. Many of the displaced creatures, flatfish, crabs, benthic worms, emerge stunned, disoriented, or exposed. Dolphins have learned to anticipate dredging cycles. Some pods arrive minutes after operations begin, positioning themselves down current where the disturbed organisms drift. The behavior is so predictable that researchers can sometimes locate dolphins simply by tracking dredging schedules. Even more surprising are the dolphins that congregate near drainage outlets and wastewater channels. To human eyes, these areas appear repellent, dark plumes mixing with seawater, carrying detritus from inland systems. But many prey species treat these outlets as gathering points. Warm, nutrient-rich fresh water creates micro-upwellings that attract baitfish. Darkness and turbidity offer cover. Dolphins exploit this with almost urban opportunism. They wait at the edges of the plumes where fish cluster, striking with rapid, coordinated lunges. These hunting grounds did not exist a century ago, yet dolphins now treat them with the same familiarity they once reserved for river mouths and tidal channels. The visual environment of ports is chaotic. Pilings, ropes, buoys, and steel hulls create a maze. Yet dolphins navigate it easily because of their echolocation, a sensory system capable of reading fine structural detail even through muddy water. Their clicks bounce off concrete walls and mooring chains, producing a dense acoustic map. But human-made noise complicates this picture. The constant roar of engines, sonar pulses, and construction activities fills the soundscape with interference. Dolphins do not simply endure this noise, they adapt to it. Across multiple coastal cities, scientists have recorded dolphins shifting their communication patterns in response to urban noise. In quiet bays, their whistles are long and melodic. In ports, the whistles sharpen. They rise to higher frequencies above the low-frequency clutter of engines. They shorten in duration to avoid masking. They become more frequent at night when the soundscape quiets. These changes mirror the adjustments human populations make when cities get louder, raising voices, altering speech patterns, clustering closer together to communicate. The dolphins' linguistic flexibility reveals how deeply their behavior can mutate under pressure. The camera follows a pod moving from a noisy harbor into a calmer estuary at nightfall. During daylight, heavy boat traffic disrupts traditional hunting. But at night, traffic diminishes, and the dolphins shift into their most efficient predatory mode. Many coastal populations now hunt more frequently after sunset than before, aligning their activity with the rhythms of human absence. Artificial lights near piers attract small fish, drawing schools into illuminated pockets. Dolphins sweep through these glowing patches with astonishing precision, using both echolocation and visual cues. The interplay of darkness and artificial light reshapes their foraging strategy. They adjust movement speeds, refine attack angles, and synchronize their timing to exploit the unique behaviors of fish illuminated from above. In some coastal cities, researchers have documented another unexpected transformation. Dolphins using structures like seawalls and anchored vessels as tools. Fish cornered against hard surfaces have limited escape routes. Dolphins strike from behind, driving prey into these artificial traps before lunging forward. This tactic resembles the mud ring feeding seen in certain wild populations, where dolphins create swirling sediment rings to confuse prey. But here, mud is replaced by concrete. The innovation is stunningly adaptive, turning a human obstacle into a weapon. The pod continues into deeper water, where the harbor gives way to the open coast. Here, the environment becomes transitional, not fully wild, not fully urban. Fishing farms line the shoreline. Nets stretch across the water, enclosing fish that grow in dense concentrations. For dolphins, these farms are audible from far away. Thousands of fish inside a pen produce a low-frequency thrum that spreads through the water like a mechanical heartbeat. Some dolphins approach the farms cautiously, circling the perimeter to capture fish that escape through small gaps or become disoriented during storms. Others stay farther away, waiting for feeding cycles when pellets spill through mesh openings. But the most remarkable behavior documented near fish farms is strategic manipulation. Certain pods have discovered that if they jolt a section of the mesh with a sudden burst of force, stunned fish drift downward, creating a temporary feeding window. The dolphins do not damage the nets, they simply exploit the physics of tension and motion. This tactic, repeated across multiple nights, demonstrates the precision and creativity dolphins bring to human-altered environments. These changes do not mean dolphins thrive without consequences. Urban oceans carry toxins, heavy metals, plastic waste, and pathogens. Dolphins accumulate these compounds in their tissues. Their lifespans shorten in heavily industrialized regions. Propeller scars appear on a higher percentage of individuals. But what stands out is not their vulnerability, it is their ability to adjust faster than many other marine species. They do not merely survive the chaos humans have imposed on the coastlines, they learn to exploit it. The camera explores a quiet inlet where a mother guides her calf through shallow water near a stormwater outflow. The calf echoes her movements, learning the details of this urban ecosystem the same way calves elsewhere learn to hunt mullet in river mouths or identify shifting sandbar channels. The calf does not know it is growing up in a degraded habitat. It only knows what it sees: warm water, abundant prey, predictable patterns. Its cultural foundation is shaped by concrete walls, shipping noise, and human-created food pulses. Its traditions will be different from those of dolphins in pristine environments. Not wrong, not less natural, simply adapted to the world that exists rather than the one that once was. This is where the idea of behavioral mutation takes center stage. Dolphins are not waiting for natural selection to shape a new biological form suited for industrial seas. Their bodies remain almost identical to those that swam through ancient, unpolluted oceans. What is changing is their software, their learned responses, their social rules, their hunting strategies, their communication styles. Culture becomes the driver of survival in an unpredictable world. A pod that masters the patterns of a trawler, the rhythms of a harbor, or the acoustics of a busy shipping lane gains an advantage immediately. That advantage spreads as older individuals teach younger ones. Within only a few years, an entire population can adopt a new behavioral norm without any changes to their underlying genes. The chapter closes with a wide shot of a pod surfing the wake of a cargo ship at dawn. The light hits the dolphins in rhythmic flashes as they rise and fall. Their bodies are silhouettes against the industrial skyline, yet their motion is effortless, fluid, and undeniably wild. They are creatures that once hunted in coral gardens and open pelagic expanses, now weaving through the architecture of human commerce. They have not lost their identity as predators or social strategists. Instead, they have expanded it. In the modern ocean, the dolphins that thrive are not the ones clinging to ancient patterns. They are the ones who treat noise, pollution, and human industry not as obstacles, but as new ecological puzzles waiting to be solved. They are the urban ocean opportunists, responding faster, learning quicker, and rewriting their place in the seascape with every leap through the wake. The first sign of change in the open ocean is not a color shift or a sudden bloom of life, it is temperature. A rise of only a few tenths of a degree moves through the upper layer like a slow, invisible tide, sliding across whole coastlines and carrying consequences far larger than its quiet arrival suggests. Thermal maps captured from orbit show it as a faint glow, first spreading around equatorial belts, then pushing into the mid-latitudes like a heat front advancing across the globe. Beneath that shimmering surface, one of the ocean's most adaptable predators is already responding. The tiger shark, a hunter built for warm water, follows that rising edge with a precision that seems almost engineered for the new era. As climates shift and seasons distort, the tiger shark becomes the perfect witness to a world warming unevenly and the perfect participant in the biological rearrangement that follows. To understand how profoundly warming water affects this animal, the camera must descend into the surface layer, where sunlight still has authority and where most thermal change is felt first. The tiger shark sails through this layer with the steady, heavy motion of a creature that wastes no energy unnecessarily. Its broad head cuts a clean path, its wide flanks barely flex, the faintest ripple of its tail is enough to hold speed. It has always thrived here, using warm water to accelerate its metabolism and sharpen its senses. But now the heat rises earlier in the year, stays longer, and reaches farther. The shark treats this not as disruption, but as opportunity, riding the seasonal extension like a drifting continent of warmth. For decades, the species remained mostly tropical and subtropical, its strongholds concentrated around coral systems, seagrass plains, and the large sandy platforms where turtles and rays gather. Yet tagging records from research groups across multiple oceans tell an entirely new story. Over the past decade, tiger sharks have been turning up in places where they were previously considered rare visitors. Off the northeastern coast of the United States, fisheries report more encounters during early summer, sometimes before local residents have even begun seasonal tourism. Off the southwestern coast of Australia, sightings now stretch deeper into the temperate zone, following streaks of warm current that push poleward with unusual consistency. What once depended on classic summer peaks now unfolds across wider windows, blurring the historical line between expected presence and unexpected intrusion. The tracking data behind this shift is not ambiguous. Accelerometer tags, temperature-logging satellite tags, and long-term fin-mounted sensors map their movement with precision. During marine heat waves, extreme events that used to be rare and are now almost annual. Tiger sharks begin making deeper dives during midday, dropping into cooler layers instead of remaining near the surface. The pattern suggests a physiological strategy: modulate core temperature by alternating between warm, food-rich shallows and cooler, restorative depths when the heat becomes overwhelming. It is a technique seen in other predators, but the tiger shark executes it with unusual consistency during high-temperature events, as though its internal thermostat has learned to anticipate the new thermal spikes. What stands out is how these dives shape the shark's horizontal movement. Rather than lingering around their usual coastal hubs, individuals begin patrolling longer coastal corridors, extending their range by dozens of kilometers each day. This expansion matches the shifting routes of their prey. Sea turtles, once predictable in their summer feeding grounds, are now arriving earlier, sometimes lingering longer into autumn. Rays that follow warmer pockets of water push into fresh areas as well. The tiger shark, a generalist by design, tracks these shifts with immediate accuracy. When the shark rises from its heat escape dives, the camera picks up the distinctive vertical stripes along its flanks. They flicker in the refracted sunlight like shadows cast by unseen pillars. Contrary to the predator stereotype of a mindless cruiser, the tiger shark is deliberate. Its broad snout houses finely tuned electroreceptors that read the faint electrical hums of muscle contractions. Its sense of smell can detect chemical plumes from injured animals across astonishing distances. But in the warming century, one ability matters even more: flexibility. Few predators adapt their hunting routes as quickly, few adjust their diet as willingly, and fewer still learn new patterns when humans unintentionally alter the map. As warming seas disrupt natural prey distributions, tiger sharks do not simply wait for conditions to stabilize, they improvise. Around popular tourist islands, discarded fish waste becomes concentrated, forming chemical trails far denser than natural carrion releases. It changes the daily movements of sharks, pulling them repeatedly toward harbors, cleaning stations, and the routes where sportfishers gut their catch offshore. This behavior is not hypothetical. Long-term surveys near coastal communities show seasonal spikes in tiger shark presence, especially after large recreational fishing events. The animals patrol the down-current side of marinas with the same calculated rhythm they once applied to turtle nesting beaches. Shark tourism operations compound this behavioral shift. Boats that chum the water to attract sharks for viewing or photography unintentionally create feeding memories, a kind of Pavlovian map imprinted onto a predator that learns quickly and forgets slowly. Over time, repeated exposure conditions some individuals to approach vessels from certain angles, expecting reward. Observers record sharks rising directly beneath propellers or circling at a distance that suggests a new form of territory, not natural habitat, but human-created feeding corridors. The tiger shark's opportunistic diet, historically including turtles, rays, fish, seabirds, and even floating carrion, now folds in this artificial predictability. Yet this adaptation is not purely beneficial. When predators begin relying on human waste streams, they face risks that evolution did not prepare for. Hooks, lines, discarded plastics, and ghost nets accumulate along harbor entrances, forming hazards that entangle or wound large predators. Sublethal injuries recorded on tagged individuals reveal deeper implications: infections around embedded hooks, impaired swimming from entanglements, and altered migration due to lingering pain or obstruction. These injuries show up disproportionately in regions with high fishing activity and warmer water, where the combination of altered prey routes and human waste creates a dangerous interface. Despite this, tiger sharks continue adjusting in ways that reveal their ecological intelligence. In seasons when heat waves compress prey into cooler zones, the sharks expand patrol routes offshore, following deeper temperature gradients instead of hugging the warm coastline. This switches their hunting mode. Rather than stalking turtles in shallow sand plains, they intercept schools of mid-water fish or track odor plumes rising from decaying whales. During these offshore phases, their movement becomes more three-dimensional, weaving between thermal layers like a needle threading fabric. The shark's body mass, large liver, and ability to store energy allow it to handle these long journeys, maintaining strength even during prey scarcity. One of the most revealing shifts emerges during prolonged warm anomalies. Satellite tags record individuals traveling to higher latitudes weeks earlier than historical patterns. In the northern hemisphere, some sharks reach cooler zones off Canada when waters still retain springtime chill. In the southern hemisphere, they appear farther down the Australian coast long before midsummer. These journeys are not random. They align almost perfectly with the movement of turtles searching for cooler grazing grounds, and with stingrays abandoning overheated sandflats in search of oxygen, rich pockets. This redistribution becomes a chain reaction. Warming pushes prey, prey movement pulls predators, and predators become accidental messengers of climate change. Watching a tiger shark sweep through a zone once considered beyond its comfortable thermal range tells the broader story more clearly than any satellite temperature map could. The shark is not merely adapting, it is mapping the future boundaries of warm water habitats. The biological consequences ripple outward. As tiger sharks enter new territories, they encounter communities of temperate predators, seals, sea lions, smaller coastal sharks, that are not accustomed to competing with such a large generalist hunter. Some respond by shifting their own patterns. Seal haulouts begin showing subtle changes in timing. Coastal shark species reposition themselves in deeper channels. Even seabird feeding flocks adjust location based on where predators now patrol. A tropical apex hunter expands, and the entire temperate ecosystem reshuffles around it, even if the changes are incremental at first. Understanding these new dynamics requires stepping beneath the surface in slow motion. The water grows warmer as the season progresses, yet the shark remains composed. Its physiology tolerates wide variation, but it still pays a metabolic price for higher temperatures. Warmer water speeds digestion, increases energy demand, and reduces the oxygen content per unit volume. To compensate, the shark must feed more often. This alone drives further movement. Longer patrols mean more encounters, more exploration, and greater likelihood of discovering new thermal corridors. Climate change accelerates metabolism. Metabolism accelerates range expansion, and range expansion accelerates ecological ripple effects that cascade through entire food webs. What emerges is not the stereotype of the tiger shark as a blunt, indifferent predator, but rather the portrait of a hunter exceptionally responsive to environmental signals. It fine-tunes its depth to manage body temperature. It rewrites its horizontal routes to follow displaced prey. It takes advantage of new food streams created by human activity. It rides warm currents like highways, using them to accelerate movement across expanding ranges. And when heat overwhelms shallow regions, it descends, slow, controlled, and efficient, to cooler layers that grant brief physiological relief before the cycle begins again. The warming ocean is forcing every species to make choices. Many struggle, some decline. A few, like the tiger shark, find ways to exploit the new rules. That does not mean the outcome is safe or stable. It means the predator at the edge of the heat front is becoming a symbol of transformation. A hunter tracing the contours of climate change with every slow turn of its massive body. Its new map is still being drawn, and every shift in temperature redraws the lines again. The tiger shark does not resist the change, it follows it. And in doing so, it shows how a warming world reshapes life at every scale, from the drifting plankton that bloom earlier each year to the heavyweight predators patrolling coastlines where they were once only passing shadows. The ocean's surface looks calm from above, a wide mirror hammered flat by morning light. But beneath that silver film, the sea is not a single continuous world. It is a patchwork of local kingdoms, each governed not by species but by cultures. Learned traditions that define how animals hunt, travel, communicate, and survive. No creature embodies this idea more clearly than the orca. While their bodies change only across long evolutionary time, their societies mutate across mere seasons, reshaping behavior at a pace that feels almost experimental. If climate change is rewriting the ocean's geography, orcas are rewriting the ocean's intelligence system, bending culture into a tool that evolves faster than genes ever could. The camera descends into a fjord where steep rock walls plunge straight into dark water. The world here is quiet, except for the distant knocks and pulses that echo through the channel. These are not random sounds. They are patterned, rhythmic markers of identity. the acoustic signatures of a pod whose traditions stretch back through generations. Orcas inherit these calls the way humans inherit language. But unlike genetic inheritance, this passing of knowledge is fluid, adaptive, responsive. A calf can learn a new hunting tactic from its mother within weeks. A pod can adopt a new prey type within a few seasons. A regional population can fracture into specialist clans because of a single innovative idea that spreads like wildfire through social learning. In an era where the ocean shifts faster than ancient instincts can handle, this cultural flexibility is not just an advantage, but a survival currency. As the camera moves deeper into the channel, the first orca appears, a sleek shadow rising slowly until its dorsal fin cuts through the surface like a blade. The presence seems deliberate, almost staged, yet what looks like confidence is actually coordination. Orcas rarely act alone. Their intelligence is structured into families, and their families are built around shared techniques. In this fjord, the resident orcas hunt herring in a manner so complex it seems choreographed. They herd the fish into tight spirals by releasing bursts of bubbles, then slap them with their tails to stun individuals before eating them one by one. This method did not arise everywhere orca live, only in populations where someone first invented the tactic and others copied it. If that innovation had never occurred, or if the pod had not adopted it, these whales would hunt very differently today. This cultural divergence becomes even more pronounced as the camera shifts to temperate coastal waters halfway across the world. Here, a different clan of orcas performs a behavior that was almost unknown a few decades ago, raiding longline fisheries. Rather than chasing fast-moving prey, these orcas track fishing vessels by sound, following engine signatures across entire nights. When the vessels begin retrieving their lines, the orcas move in. They have perfected a technique of stripping valuable fish directly off the hooks, one after another, with astonishing precision. They pull just hard enough to slide the fish free without snapping the line. This is not instinct. There is no evolutionary pressure that shaped a gene for fishing gear theft. This is innovation. Social learning turned into a strategic industry. Fishermen describe entire pods assembling behind boats, each member taking turns at the line, the way people gather around a conveyor belt. What began as isolated incidents spread pod by pod until it became a recognizable regional culture. Young calves learn it simply by watching. Adults refine it through repetition. Over a handful of years, this cultural mutation reshaped the foraging landscape of the entire region far more rapidly than any ecological shift could explain. Where genetic adaptation requires hundreds or thousands of generations, cultural evolution in orcas can rewrite the rulebook in one or two. In warmer seas, the story takes yet another form. In some regions, orcas have begun targeting stingrays and other bottom-dwelling prey that were once considered too risky for regular hunting. The rays carry venomous barbs, and a badly placed strike can be fatal. Yet these whales approach the hunt with surgeon-like precision. They flip the rays with bursts of pressure from their snouts or with carefully placed tail slaps. Once inverted, the ray becomes helpless, its reflexes disrupted, its barb aimed harmlessly away. The technique appears nowhere in orca populations that do not regularly encounter rays. But in shallow bays where climate warming has encouraged ray populations to expand, some orca pods began experimenting. They learned, they refined, they taught. And within a few seasons, what was once a dangerous and unpredictable prey item became a stable, reliable food source. The most dramatic example of rapid cultural innovation, however, occurs in surf zones where seals haul out to rest on low ice sheets or small beaches. In these waters, certain orca pods have mastered the technique known as wave washing, a coordinated assault that looks like pure physics in motion. The whales gather in formation, accelerate simultaneously, and thrust their bodies upward with enough force to generate a rolling wave. That wave lifts the edge of the ice, tilts it, and dislodges the seal in a single surge. The prey slides helplessly into the water where the rest of the pod waits. The behavior is so specialized that even among orcas, only a few cultural clans practice it. It requires teamwork, timing, and an understanding of cause and effect that rivals the problem-solving skills seen in great apes. What makes this even more remarkable is how quickly such a technique spreads within the practicing pod. Calves begin imitating the motions long before they can generate meaningful waves. Juveniles practice in the shallows, experimenting with angles and body positions, failing repeatedly until the correct pattern emerges through trial and error. Adults correct them not through physical coercion, but through modeling, performing the action again and again until the younger whales internalize the mechanics. Over time, entire family lines become defined not by appearance, but by the traditions they uphold. But rapid cultural change does not only produce elegant hunting tactics, it can also create darker, more controversial behaviors. In several regions, isolated incidents have been recorded of orcas intentionally flipping small fishing vessels. At first, these encounters seemed like accidents, perhaps the result of curiosity or confusion. But as documented cases increased, a pattern emerged. Some pods appear to understand that flipping a vessel allows them access to nets, lines, or fish storage bins. The behavior is selective. Not every boat, not every time. And its spread mirrors the expansion patterns of other learned techniques. Reports show that juveniles often initiate the contact, nudging rudders or tapping hulls before adults join in with more forceful movements. This is not aggression for its own sake. It is opportunistic problem solving, a cultural attempt to exploit a new food source created unintentionally by humans. Culture in orcas is not merely a collection of learned habits, it is the defining structure of their ecology. Different pods can occupy the same ocean, yet live entirely separate lives. One pod may specialize in salmon, another in marine mammals, another in benthic prey. These differences are so deep that even when multiple pods share a feeding ground, they rarely interact socially. They may swim past one another with barely a glance, carrying worlds of knowledge that the other pod does not share. This separation maintains cultural boundaries that shape each group's identity more strongly than genetics ever could. Climate change accelerates this process. As prey shifts due to warming, acidification, and habitat loss, some orca populations adapt instantly by altering their target species. Others refuse to abandon their traditional prey, even when it becomes scarce. This produces winners and losers within the same species. Those with flexible cultures thrive, those with rigid traditions struggle. In this way, natural selection begins acting not on genes but on culture. Pods that cling to old habits may decline, pods that innovate may expand. The ocean becomes a laboratory where intelligence and tradition determine survival more quickly than biological evolution, yet there is also a cost to such rapid adaptation. Just as cultural innovations can improve survival, they can also spread strategies that heighten risk. Longline raiding exposes whales to hooks. Boat interference behaviors risk injury from propellers. Stingray hunting can lead to puncture wounds. Wave washing in unstable ice conditions carries the danger of entrapment. The same cultural engine that allows for swift learning also allows for swift propagation of dangerous techniques. A single bold attempt by one juvenile can echo across an entire pod for decades. Still, the orca's greatest strength remains its ability to evaluate, modify, and discard techniques based on outcomes. Behavioral researchers have documented pods abandoning hunting methods that prove inefficient, replacing them with alternate strategies within a few seasons. This willingness to update tactics resembles human problem-solving far more than instinctive animal behavior. It is culture functioning as a living organism, mutating, optimizing, recalibrating, and passing its improved form to the next generation. What the camera ultimately reveals is that the orca is not merely a predator. It is a cultural architect, building and rebuilding its ecological role as conditions shift. Every new behavior is a record of a choice, a learned response to a changing world. As climate, human activity, and prey availability continue to transform the ocean, orcas will not wait for their genes to catch up. They will think, they will observe, they will innovate. And their culture, flexible, transmissible, and astonishingly fast, will mutate along with the sea.